Hey, thanks for making the trip up here, Joe Kent.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
I didn't know, I guess I didn't know your first name was Joe because when we were in Ranger Regiment,
no one has first names.
No one has first names. Yeah. And so, yeah, I like to give my guests a little opportunity to give a backstory of who they are and where they came from. But before we go into that, I think it's just interesting how we got connected.
Yeah.
Is I have a good friend of mine who I used to be deployed with like in 04, 05. He reached out to me and said, hey, there's this former SF guy that I have a mutual friend with him and he's running for Congress. You should connect with this guy and you should try and help him out however you can. And so I looked you up and I was like, oh, we're in 2nd Battalion together.
Yeah.
And I mean, man, it's been 20 years now.
That's crazy to think it's been 20
Isn't
years.
That nuts?
Yeah.
And I think you were, when did you get to 2nd Battalion?
98.
98. Okay.
Yeah.
I got there at the very beginning of 2000.
Okay. Yeah.
And so we crossed paths briefly.
Yep.
And then you went and did the SF thing. So
yeah.
So yeah, go ahead. Just give a little bit introduction, who you are, where you came from, and we'll just take it from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So born and raised in Portland, Oregon. So another Northwest guy. Pretty much my entire time growing up, I had no aspirations of doing anything else but joining the military and being some kind of commando. Ebbed and flowed between if I wanted to be a Navy SEAL or, a Green Beret or a Ranger based on, whatever book, because there was no internet back then that I had just read. So, but a big deal for me was the 1993 Black Hawk Down incident in Mogadishu.
Okay.
So I was 13, knew I wanted to go in the military and do something. And then that got blasted all over the news that, a bunch of guys got into a huge firefight and we lost several soldiers, and there was all the graphic images of the bodies getting dragged to the streets. So at that point I was like, wow, that's pretty amazing that there's actually guys here in America that are going overseas and fighting for the country. Because, 90s, 80s, that wasn't like,
there was not much going on.
Yeah. So I was like, wow, who are these guys? And that's when I really started doing some research on the Ranger Regiment and, kind of thought, hey, I'll go try that first and talk to some Army recruiters. They were nice enough to entertain my questions when I was like 15. They were like, yeah, sure, kid, you can be a Ranger or whatever.
Well, everybody that walks through those doors wants to be a Ranger or a SEAL, so they hear it every day.
Yeah. So they gave me a little recruiting poster and let me keep the dream alive. But when I graduated high school, I kind of had a contract ready to go and join the military. Right.
So did you have a RIP contract then? Or
I did, yeah.
Okay.
I did, yeah. So I actually had a pretty good recruiter, which most people have like terrible recruiter stories. But I had one who was like, okay, nobody wants to be an 11 Bravo Ranger in Portland, Oregon. So I think we can probably hook this kid
They had
up.
openings for you.
Yeah, they were like, okay. I mean, I think most of them were soft skill of some sort, and they were just amazed that I wanted to be an 11 Bravo. So, infantrymen. So they were nice enough to give me what I wanted. My parents were like, hey, we don't think you should go in the military, but if you're going to, make sure you get it in writing what you want. So they were adamant that they put the Ranger contract in there. So yeah.
That's cool, man. Yeah. I didn't have, I didn't have a terrible recruiter, but he also didn't get me a RIP contract.
Oh, really?
He told me, he goes, I got you airborne infantry because that's all we have left.
Yeah.
And when you're in airborne school, you can contract the regiment and they'll give you a slot at RIP. And I was like, okay. And that actually happened and it worked out.
Oh, that's awesome.
But come to find out that there's an ebb and flow to that.
It's like hit and miss, right?
Depending on needs of the regiment.
Yep.
And so it was very likely that I could have ended up at 82nd, which, I mean, just like you, like I wanted to be a Ranger or a SEAL.
Yeah.
And I didn't have really a reason why. I was just like, I'm going to go in the military. I want to do something badass.
Right.
And it ended up working out. But if you're listening, because I know a lot of people that listen want to go into the military, just like Joe said, get it in writing.
Get it in writing, yeah. If they don't give you what you want, walk out.
Yep. and leave your phone number.
Yeah, leave your phone number. Just say you're going to go be whatever the opposite service is.
Yeah, exactly.
If it's Army, just be like, oh, the Navy said I could go right into SEALs. Just walk out.
Yeah. So you got to the regiment then in 98?
98, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was it was an interesting time, I think, to get there just because, the Army was very much a peacetime Army. But Ranger Regiment, like, as you know, like was always on a war footing. Probably, I'm sure guys that got there during the height of the GWAT are like, you don't know what you're talking about. But even in 98, I think compared to the rest of the military, there was still a combat mentality because we had guys that had done, jumped into Panama, Grenada, We had, I think, 2 or 3 guys that had been in 3rd Battalion for Mogadishu that were there.
Yeah. Yeah. Who was in Charlie Company? There was a staff sergeant when I was there who got wounded in Mogadishu.
Yeah, there was Rodriguez.
Yep. That was him.
And then there was I think another guy. I can't remember the other guy's name. But yeah, there was 2.
I think the Ranger Regiment did a good job at keeping a combat focus.
Yeah.
When I think everybody deep down inside felt like, man, nothing's going to happen.
Yeah, like maybe there'll be a Panama.
Yeah,
there'll be a one-day combat.
And maybe you remember this, but it was when we had Captain Donahue as our CO, and we had a company formation, and he's like, Rangers, listen to me. History repeats itself. If you know Ranger history and U.S. military history, there is a 100% chance that this battalion is going to war.
Yeah.
He goes, and I don't know when or where, but I will guarantee you 50% of the men standing in this formation will see combat. And it was like,
boy, was he right.
Yeah.
And he was probably way under.
He was way under.
Yeah.
And I was like, I never forgot that, because I mean, that guy's a stud. His resume speaks for itself. And I'm sure you followed his career.
Oh yeah.
Okay. And so, but even as a young company commander, like,
yeah, that's definitely a vision he had, and he's right. He read the history, and he was 100% right.
Yeah.
Within short order too. I think within like a year or 2 probably.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. It was, we had, were you there when he left and Captain Benchoff took command, or did you leave right before that? I think
I remember Donahue, but I don't remember but I think I was there when he left. So yeah, I must have been.
Okay.
Because I think he had been gone for a bit when I left.
Got it. Yeah. And, I mean, not even to say anything disparaging about him, but going from Captain Donahue to really anybody.
Yeah.
It's like, man,
especially the trajectory that guy was on. I mean, he knew he wanted to go to bigger and better places. And,
I remember I was like a brand new private, and we did EIB. And on the 12-mile road march, he did the whole thing, like with my group, like motivating us. Let's go, Rangers! Just hammering
like
it,
running.
So I'm curious. Did you get there with like Arredondo and Lynch and that era of guys?
So I was just a little bit behind them.
Okay,
they were like corporals and maybe E5s when I got there.
Got it.
Yeah.
So they were smoking the shit out of you.
Yeah.
Like
those guys were always like kind of cool. Like they were
Arredondo,
a little bit more laid back.
Yeah.
It wasn't. There wasn't that. Draconian mentality.
Yeah, when we were, I mean, this was peacetime military. You got to Ranger Regiment, hazing was just life.
Yeah, it was.
That was it, you know?
It was...
And it's funny, like, I remember Michaelis. I don't know if you remember him or not.
I remember the name. Man.
Okay. Yeah. He was a murderer. Like, he was the evilest person in the world as a TAP Spec 4.
It was just that culture, man.
Yeah.
It's like what you had to be.
And then, I got my E5 and he got his E6, and we've been homies ever since.
Oh, really?
Yeah, So it's funny. It's like some of the people that are the hardest on you end up being the closest with.
Yeah.
I
ended up going to the Q course with Ed Holmeyer, who unfortunately is no longer with us, but he was in, I want to say Bravo Company. And he was like a legendary guy, at 275. At the time, he was like an E6 and I was an E4 and went to the Q course together. And so I was like afraid to talk to him still until like halfway through the Q course when I realized that like only this weird place in the military, the Ranger Regiment, really cares about that stuff.
Yeah.
So then we actually became pretty good friends,
I've only, do you know Mike Glover? Did you ever cross paths with him?
We have some mutual friends. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So he did the show a few months ago, but he's the only other guy that was in Special Forces that's been on the show.
Oh, nice.
So I was excited to just kind of hear like what that path looked like, what the Q course was like, and just for people that are interested in that, because I know a lot of people are.
Yeah, man, for sure. So I went to Special Forces selection, and I think my selection was a little bit weird because I went to selection during 9/11. So I like signed in on the 9th or the 10th, and we like took our PT test and got shipped out to Camp McCall, where they run the stress phase, land nav phase. And so we had been out there for a day or two. We had done 1 or 2 events, but it hadn't really amped up yet. And they called us in. They're like, "Hey, America's under attack." And I'm all of an E4 and I know everything because I'm from Ranger Regiment. And I'm like, there's a scenario for SFAS? Like this is not the intel I got. I thought we were just gonna like ruck and do PT and stuff, you know? And so it took about an hour or so for them to convince me that, you know, like there was actually a world changing event was going on, because they put the TVs on.
Yeah.
They grabbed everybody. They're like, hey, if you're from New York or DC or have family there, like we're going to open up all the offices and you can use the phones. And I was like, oh shit. Man.
Oh, this is no longer a scenario.
This is weird. Yeah. So, they got training back on track as quickly as they could. They let some guys go home who had family in New York. But then after that, got selected somehow. You know, it's a pretty physical, you know, physically taxing, land nav intensive thing. They want to see how well you can make decisions on the fly. It's kind of like the opposite of like RIP when we went through. There's no like in your face yelling or any of that type of stuff.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's all like the gentleman's course mentality.
And is it still like that, or is SFAS kind of a beatdown now?
So I think now there's some beatdown in it.
Is that because when you went through, were they not allowing the SF baby
there was
contract?
There was none of those. I was being an E4. You're the SF baby. If you
got it.
There.
Okay.
Yeah. So maybe that's why they switched it around, and they went back to there's a team week phase that's way more up in your face. I think when I went through, it kind of modeled the like special mission unit selection model, where you're doing a bunch of land nav, time marches, decision making under stress type of events. So yeah, after that they tell you, hey, you passed Q course, or you passed the selection. They send you down to Fort Bragg for, you know, about a year plus for the Special Forces qualification course. So
when you attend SFAS, are you still part of 2nd Battalion?
Yeah, I was. Yeah.
And it's just like
you're TDY basically. TDY,
okay.
Yeah, and you come back and then they cut you orders pretty quick.
Got it.
Because they want you to show up to the Q course.
And then as soon as you go to the Q course, you fall under that command.
You do,
obviously.
Yeah, you fall under the schoolhouse there.
Okay.
Yeah.
What if what happens to people that are unsuccessful at the Q course?
Needs the Army. So you retain your old MOS up until you get your tab and your Green Beret.
Got it.
Yeah, it's kind of, you kind of go back to wherever.
That in itself is such a motivating factor
right.
to be successful.
Yeah.
Like I joke about Ranger School. It's like Ranger School, yeah, it's a good combat leadership course and whatever, right? Like it has its pluses and its minuses, but the real reason why you want to pass Ranger School as a regimental private is because you don't want to be getting tab check and scrubbing the bathrooms anymore.
Yeah, and you know it's down the street too. You're like, man, I got it pretty good at battalion.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't get tossed. Yeah.
And you hear the horror stories. Like I'm sure we've all had them, guys that you went through like basic and airborne with, and then they quit RIP.
Yeah. Yeah, man.
And you stay in contact with them and you hear the horror stories.
Yeah. And they're like, oh man, that was a huge mistake.
Yeah. I had a buddy that actually passed RIP with me, and I went to Alpha Company and he went to Bravo Company, and he had a team leader that he hated, and he just RFS'd himself.
Oh no.
He's like, I can't take this. This is stupid. And like, okay, well, be careful, you know?
Yeah.
And he got a hold of me a few months later. Worst mistake he's ever made in his life.
I regret this decision.
Yeah. He goes, man, you wouldn't believe it. We went to the range, and when we were done shooting, we had to go to a weapons cleaning table, and we all cleaned our weapons together by the number as a E5, like walked you through it.
So
and I was like,
he had lots of time to contemplate his life. He was probably like,
yeah, because I mean, like, remember when we would get off of range 7,
yeah,
you just take your weapons upstairs, you'd order pizza and crack open some beers and clean your weapons.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah.
And to the regular Army, I guess that's like
insane.
Yeah. Just craziness.
Yeah. Like someone's going to lose their job. By the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the whole time you're in the Q course, because the Q course is at North Carolina, so the home of 82nd Airborne. And so you can see the 82nd Airborne in all its glory there. So you kind of know, like,
a daily reminder.
If I screw up, or if I have a moment where I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore, like you can see what awaits you.
Yeah.
So I think that keeps a lot of guys straight.
That's funny. Yeah. And nothing but love for the 82nd.
Yeah.
But the truth is, like, it's a different animal.
It's just a different beast. Yeah.
Even downrange, like we had a platoon of 82nd come out and operate out of the safe house that we set up. In Berry Cout, Afghanistan.
Yep.
And I mean, I don't remember what the elevation of the safe house was, but on patrol, we'd be above 10,000 feet.
Yeah.
And it was summertime and their platoon went out with like full flak Kevlar, full battle rattle. And I remember my PL like said, he's like, hey, I pulled their PL aside and was like, hey, listen, like, I understand why you're doing this, but it's not feasible.
Right. Like someone's going to die.
Like we wore just a rack with 4 magazines and a baseball cap.
Yeah.
That's it, you know? And sure as shit, they came back like a couple hours later with a bunch of heat casualties and fallouts and stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, come on.
Yeah.
You know?
Similar story. We had I think it was a squad of 10th Mountain guys assigned to us in Iraq, my ODA. And they had like conflicting guidance. Like they were supposed to be all according to their standards, wear all their kit and all that. My team sergeant luckily was an E8 and went and talked to their first sergeant and was like, how about you don't come back over to my compound to correct your guys and we'll just take care of them. And so they worked out like a gentleman's agreement.
Yeah.
So we had those guys, you know, like growing their hair long and, you know, we treated them right and they treated us really, really well. It's funny though, because all of them ended up going to selection later on. So it was like recruiting, you know?
Yeah, that's cool, man.
Yeah.
I had an experience. We were in, our company was in Bagram.
Yeah.
And my squad had to go down to Kandahar for like a detail. It was just our squad. And we were also living with a team of SF guys. And it was only a few days, right? And so we were just wearing baseball caps and, you know, whatever shoes you wanted.
Yeah.
And the sergeant major from the 82nd's like, hey.
Has a heart attack.
Who are you with? We're like, 2nd Battalion, Sergeant Major, like obviously you're going to give a Sergeant Major respect, you know?
Right.
And he was like all bent out of shape. And he's like, just so you know, I know this guy and I know that guy. Started dropping a bunch of names that were part of our chain of command, you know? They'll be hearing from me. And I remember thinking like, dude, we're in Afghanistan. Yeah. And this is a Sergeant Major. And he's concerned about a guy that's not even under his command wearing a baseball cap.
Yeah. What are the priorities here?
Yeah. And that's the kind of stuff that will drive people out of the military. But I mean, that in itself is one of the things that's like so appealing about the special operations community.
Oh, yeah.
The amount of bullshit that you deal with is, I mean,
it's probably the most powerful
5%,
powerful recruiting tool right there. I mean, I'm sure all the cool videos of, you know, guys running around with guns and cool kit, like get some guys, but I think a lot more guys that come from the force are just like, I'm sick of this crap.
Yeah.
Like I see how those guys are living. I'm going to go do that.
And especially if you're going to do a career, you know what I mean? Like I only did one enlistment.
Yeah.
So I guess you could, if you did one enlistment from 18 to 22.
Yeah, you can
like it is what it is. But to make a whole career of that,
man,
nightmare, man.
Yeah, that's a whole different ball game.
So then you went to the Q course, and that's over a year, right?
Yeah, it's long. I think it's more streamlined now. Ours was I think fairly, I don't want to say fairly disorganized, just little disorganized. So there was a crop of us that got there as like E4s, and they were talking about the SF Baby program, but they didn't have like a PLDC internal. So they sent a bunch of us down to 18th Airborne Corps PLDC.
Vacation.
Which like, yeah. But they were really into like the Army. And so coming out of Ranger Regiment, man, like I felt like I was pretty tactically proficient and like good at doing PT and my job.
Yeah.
But like Army stuff, man, they were like, who are you? Like, you don't know any of this stuff? I have no idea. I'm sorry. You know, like I'll do push-ups. They're like, well, we don't really do that here. We'll have you read an essay. And I'm like, okay. Right.
Yeah. Wait, what?
Yeah. So I'd go through all that, which again, motivated me to just stay in the Q course.
Yeah.
You know, not screw that up.
Man, when I went to PLDC, like regiment always sends like 5 or 6 guys at a time.
Yeah.
And
because you take the place over otherwise. Your limit's 5.
And man, I don't even remember, what was it, like 3 weeks or a month or something?
Yeah, it's like roughly a month, I think.
And dude, I remember like doing patrols and land nav and digging fighting positions and stuff.
Yeah.
With a bunch of people that don't do any of that stuff.
I've never done any of
it. Ever, you know? Yeah. And it was like a vacation. And I remember they would rotate who's in charge of PT. And so when it was my day, I was like, we're doing a ProMass run. And the cadre pulls me aside. He's like, hey.
So no, we're not.
No, we're not. So, but yeah, PLDC was like a vacation, man.
Yeah. So yeah, after that, then we hit the ground running. It's like the first part of the Q course. And I think that they changed the order up nowadays. And I think that's to make sure there's no downtime. So I think at the time I was there, it wasn't as big of a process. So you had to wait for like one cycle to get done for the next one to start. So now they kind of stack them in different orders to keep guys busy. But when I went, we went to small unit tactics first.
Got it.
Which is like a mini Ranger school. It's actually, I mean, it's almost 2 months. And so they're just getting everybody on the same sheet of music as far as like patrolling goes. And there's some basic CQB, but just to make sure everybody's tactically proficient. And I actually really enjoyed that because it was, coming out of battalion, it was very familiar territory.
What was your overall perception of just like how the Q courses ran and the type of people that it attracted? Because I'm sure you remember as a young Ranger, they're always casting stones at SF.
Always, yeah.
Those guys are fat and lazy.
Yep.
And it's funny because you start to believe these things that you hear.
Because it's your world.
It's your world.
Yeah.
And then when I started like doing contract work and I worked with all kinds of Force Recon guys, Green Berets, SEALs, I was like, dude, everyone's pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly. There's like, different cultures, but overall, most guys are kind of the same.
Yeah.
And the dirty secret of, like you said, guys that make it a career. I mean, Ranger Regiment, like once you get to like staff sergeant, there's only so many more jobs you can do. There's only like one guy is going to become a platoon sergeant, in that platoon. And so,
and who wants to do that?
Right. And then
you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And so I have one buddy, shout out Bohannon. I don't know if you remember Bohannon.
I do. Yeah.
He was my 203 gunner when I was a team leader.
Yeah.
And we were like privates together and everything. Yeah. And he went all the way up E1 through E9 in Ranger Regiment.
That's awesome.
And now he took command somewhere in Germany.
Cool.
And so that they promoted him and that was like his farewell gift,
Yeah, he gets to go to Germany. And
yeah. But man, that's a hard life.
Yeah, it's hard, man.
Like I always tell people, I think the Ranger Regiment is a great place to start your military career.
Amen. Yeah.
And then if you want to stay in, go on to bigger and better things. And there's nothing wrong with the Ranger platoon sergeant, but just like you said, there's very limited amount of billets for that.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I feel like there's greater opportunity elsewhere.
There is. I mean, to answer your question, that the cool thing about SF is also kind of the dangerous thing about SF is that it is big boy rules. Some of that culture's changed a little bit with how much SF has grown and getting the younger guys. We've kind of had to, I think, become more traditional leaders in a sense. When I got there, it was very much like if you were an E4, you were kind of an endangered species, or even an E5. There were like, just wasn't that many of you. There was a lot of guys that were, fairly senior. So they kind of gave you a lot of leeway in the Q course. So there wasn't a ton of making sure you did everything that you had to do to be successful. You kind of had to figure it out on your own, which I thought was kind of cool because there was the instructors that you're like, okay, that guy's kind of fat and out of shape. And like, there's probably a reason why he's here. And then you could see the instructors who were just studs and you're like, man, I want to be like that guy. I'm going to gravitate towards him.
Yeah.
And then you could see the dichotomy in the students too. So, and then it's the same thing, but kind of even more extreme when I got to group and on teams. There were some phenomenal guys that had just been around forever that knew all kinds of stuff. And then there were some guys that they were probably hiding behind their long tab and their Green Beret a little bit.
Yeah.
That were just like, no one's really going to come screw with me. Yeah.
So then, I mean, you go through all that training and I'm sure we'll go back and go over some details because I'm interested in the Q course, but then you get assigned to a group.
Yep.
And how is that? What is the structure of that even like? Is it like a battalion sized element or?
I mean, they use the same nomenclature other than teams. They still use companies, and each company is supposed to have 6 teams of 12 guys. And then each battalion has 3 companies. And then there's 4 companies, or 4 battalions per SF group now.
Got it.
So the nomenclature is confusing because it doesn't fit. It's the same words, but it doesn't fit in the same way it does in the regular army.
Yeah.
Or even the regiment.
No, like the regiment, just like you said, that's inside the red fence is your world.
Yeah.
And everything outside of it.
Yeah.
Like people talk about like a brigade or whatever. I'm like, what?
I still get hazy on that, man. When people are like, it's a division or a brigade. Like I learned a lot of that just being overseas, like looking at battle space owners and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I was not fluent in that language at all.
That's funny.
Yeah.
And so what group did you get assigned to then?
5th group.
And is that just needs of SF or do you get your wish list like you did in RIP?
Yeah, you get to make a wish list. And in general, like 5th group's at Fort Campbell and their area of responsibility geographically is the Middle East. So so not only do you get to go over to like the places where you can't drink and make a lot of TDY, you also get to go learn like one of the harder languages. So I put down 5th Group because they're the guys who did the invasion on horseback, and we're pretty legendary. And I also figured, like, hey, if there's going to be bad things happening, 5th Group's probably going to get a piece because it's probably coming out of the Middle East, just the early 2000s.
Now, with how SF is structured, like each group has a different area of responsibility.
Yep.
But I mean, once the war has been going on,
I mean,
they just rotate guys out and understand, like, obviously you can't just have your whole career on hold in case something happens in Colombia, with the FARC. Remember that?
Yeah, man. So I think, initially, I think there was some consternation in the regiment because you had like 5th Group and 3rd Group and a little slice of 10th that were kind of on all the initial pushes. And the guys holding down PACOM or holding down South America were they were doing still important missions, against the FARC or the stuff that we were doing in the Philippines, but they weren't getting as big of a piece. There were some teams here and there, but as a group. So I think probably by the mid 2000s, everybody's AOR became CENTCOM. Like they would rotate, and then the guys from 7th Group who do South America and 1st who does like the Pacific, then they kind of had a good gig because they would go do hyperkinetic deployment to one of the hot war zones, and then they'd be like, all right, we're going to take the year and we're going to get back down to Colombia.
That wouldn't suck.
Yeah, it didn't suck at all for them. So if you're in 5th Group, you're like, wait a sec, where are we going again? They're like, we're going back to Iraq.
What was, I can't think of the name of the book, but it was about the invasion of Afghanistan with SF.
Oh, there's the Men on Horseback that became 12 Strong, the movie.
No, that's not the one I'm thinking of.
Or Jawbreaker, maybe?
Give me 1 second because I don't want to mess this up. I want people to know. All right. It is The Only Thing Worth Dying For.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yep.
So that was 5th Group?
That was 5th Group, yep.
So if anyone's interested, that's one of the most interesting books I've ever read.
Yeah.
Like, as somebody that was supposed to jump on Rhino... Did you hear that story about 2nd Battalion?
Yeah, so I got back from SFAS, and like we were supposed to. Everybody was in Germany, right?
We were in Jordan.
Yeah, but they're like Biko or somebody was in Germany.
So there was different elements of the regiment, kind of all over the place. I think 3rd Battalion was actually on an aircraft carrier, right?
Something like that. But I remember we all thought it was going to be 2nd, and like we got. I was on rear D getting ready to PCS to the Q course.
Okay.
And my squad leader had just successfully passed the other selection for Delta, and he was getting ready to PCS too. And he was like, I think we're going to meet the battalion out in, Germany potentially. Like we may jump into Afghanistan. And so I think we had hope maybe for about a day. And then we saw 3rd Battalion jump in.
Yeah. So, man, that was such a shit show. Like, so I graduated Ranger School 2 days after 9/11.
Oh crap!
So I had kind of a similar experience. Like we were at Eglin Air Force Base, and you do your last jump back into Benning.
Yeah.
And we were rigging up in our parachutes down at Eglin, and Cadre's like, "Hey, de-rig, drop your chutes over here, come into the auditorium. We have something to show you." And it was 9/11, and so we were like, "Oh shit!" Like it's going down.
Yeah.
And so we did graduation where nobody attended because nobody's family could travel, down, And then as soon as I got back to 2nd Battalion, we deployed to Jordan. And Jordan was that deployment was already pre-planned as a training deployment.
Yeah.
But now since we were in the Middle East and they were planning the invasion of Rhino, they're like, well, 2nd Battalion's already there. So add them to the roster. So we were going to jump Rhino.
Yeah. And
it was like, it got canceled last minute. They said they've determined that it's a battalion size mission and 3rd Battalion's going to take it. And 1st Sergeant Kennedy was like throwing chairs around the talk and like going crazy.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking like, even though I think there was one enemy KIA on that whole objective. Yeah. And I heard he got shot like 200 times.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Because, as you're moving to your LOA, every Ranger's like, but we ended up getting scratched from that. And I was like, man, just to be just the historical significance of that
Yeah,
would have been cool.
absolutely.
And then I read that book. I was like, oh, SF had been there for a month already.
Right, yeah.
And the CAG guys too, you know? And one of my CAG buddies was like, oh, I was on Rhino on a 4-wheeler when you guys jumped.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't hear that I didn't hear that story until like 6 months ago.
Yeah, like years later. Yeah.
Yeah. But man, that book, it really talks about how that's like the traditional SF mission, where they went in, they found somebody, Hamid Karzai, who they could train and then also support and build a network for and get a local support behind.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like your guys' traditional bread and butter.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it sounded like everything was going perfect.
Yeah.
Until more people wanted a piece of the pie.
Right.
They started putting officers out there that wanted to get in on that. And someone called a JDAM on you guys on their own position.
Yep.
And it's like, and I could tell as I was reading that book, I was like, oh, this is going to end bad.
Yeah.
You can just, the way they're referencing people and like some past tense things and stuff. And I was like, fuck, man. Yeah. And so were you part of any of that stuff or? No,
so I was in the Q course.
Got it. That's right.
Yeah,
I mean, you just said that. Yeah.
Yeah. So 2000 to 2003, I was in the Q course. Yeah.
Man, that's such a, like
2002. Yeah.
What a long military school though. That's like going to college.
Dude, it's forever. And I was a weapons guy. So I had the shortest path. I had a 6-month language. So not necessarily the shortest path. If you're, I guess if you were like a native speaker of a language, you could get out of language school. Okay. And if you're a weapons guy, it's still going to take you about a year. So it took me about a year and a half, no recycles to get out of it, you know?
And so your language is obviously Arabic then?
So actually, ironically enough, it was Pashto.
Pashto, okay.
Yeah, because Afghanistan was kind of hot then.
Yeah.
And so that's where we thought the enduring conflict was going to be. So
how was that? Like, are you still fluent?
Oh man, no. I'm actually better at Arabic because, of course, how the Army works. I went to Pashto language school for 6 months, and then promptly went to Iraq 8 times, and then went to Yemen and some other places. I never went to Afghanistan. I couldn't buy an Afghan deployment.
Oh dang!
Yeah, which is kind of funny. So my initial language was Pashto, but it helped me because it gave me a basis. Like the alphabet's roughly the same. It's not exactly the same, but it's funny because the way the military treats linguists. You have to have a very high aptitude to learn a language to even get one of those slots, and then to go down to defense language school. Like SF, I don't know if they've changed it, but when I went, like they did not care. They were like, hey, you get the group you're going to, and then we give you a language. And if you want to leave here, you're going to pass the test. like we don't care because it's called like the D lab. I forgot what that stands for, but it basically assesses your ability to learn a language. And we all had to go take it one day. And one of the instructors took us down to the language lab on Bragg. And he was like, look guys, like if you want to take this thing and do really well, that's cool. If you get sent to the 7th group, we're going to send you to Spanish. If you can't write your name on the test and you get sent to 5th group and we give you Arabic or we give you Russian, you're learning Arabic, you're learning Russian. That was kind of the mentality. So it was kind of funny to see just that contrast.
Man, that's a gift, learning languages.
Yeah.
Like I took Spanish for a couple of years and it's high school, but it never clicked. Yeah. And then, I mean, when it was all said and done, I did 14 deployments to Afghanistan and Iraq between the military and contracting. Yep. And I think I can say like, assalamu alaikum, you know?
I think the key is immersion, man. It's tough being a native English speaker. And America's so big and we all speak the same language, which is kind of cool. But like, I think it kind of doesn't ever really activate that language muscle in our brain.
Yeah.
Native English speakers.
And once you do, because there was a guy on my team who, he already spoke Spanish and German. Oh, wow. And over the course of a couple deployments to Iraq, he was basically fluent in Arabic too. Yeah. And I was like, man, your brain, his brain was like a sponge for languages. Yeah. But like you're saying, like some people, they can activate that. Yep. Or also just like life circumstances kind of forces some people to. Like I remember I went and took a train around Europe for a while, and I was talking to this girl, and she spoke like 7 languages, something crazy. Yeah. And I was like, I feel like a dummy. You know? Right. Yeah. And she goes, no, it's not. She goes, a lot of times Americans, that's kind of their outlook. Like they feel like they're stupid or something. Right. And she goes, it's just out of necessity. She goes, if I go shopping and I take a train an hour north, I have to speak this language. Yeah. If I go visit my grandma in this city, I have to speak that language. And it's just geographically, you know, it'd be like if each state in America spoke a different language, it'd be a different thing, you know?
Yeah, man, totally. So I struggled through the 6 months of like Pashto language school. I was lucky because Pashto was such a new language for the U.S. military that our test was kind of bullshit. It was like we had to take an oral proficiency test, which is like you have a conversation, and I think the instructors, as long as you made the effort, they sort of felt sorry for you, and they're like, all right, this guy can kind of speak. So we didn't have to take the big formal test that some of the other languages did. So I thought that was really hard. But it set me up for success when I went to Iraq eventually. Because when we started working with Iraqis, like the traditional SF mission, we initially didn't have that many interpreters, and we started doing different missions and having to train up Iraqi soldiers. I found myself without an interpreter, but I knew the Arabic alphabet from Pashto. And so I could at least sound stuff out, and I knew how to do some of the more difficult like sounds. And then I was just being immersed in it. I like learned enough to get by with the Iraqis I was hanging out with.
So when you're deployed with that mission, like training up a host nation force, and then you have other teams that are like direct action guys, right?
Yeah.
That are just out kicking doors.
Yep.
Is that just like a rotation, or is it a different mission set? How do you get?
Yeah. So each company is basically supposed to retain a certain set of skills as far as usually infiltration specifics. There's always a dive team. There's a Halo team. There's a mountain team. Mobility, when I got the 5th group, was really big because they had just done the ground invasion of Iraq. But prior to that, too, they had spent pretty much from 91, from the first Gulf War up until we reinvaded Iraq, a little bit of a detour into Afghanistan. But they had been looking at doing mounted special reconnaissance in the desert. So every team had to maintain that baseline of like, can they load up in trucks and transport a team to go do either reconnaissance, look at where Saddam's scuds were essentially, or link up with like a local resistance force and do the SF thing and train them up. One company is supposed to retain like the direct action mission set. And that's been a lot of consternation because those guys don't usually focus on like unconventional warfare or training up, local forces. So they're basically like a bunch of Rangers that, are more senior guys than most Rangers.
Yeah. And then, do you get any say in?
Yeah, you can volunteer.
Okay.
You can always volunteer.
What's kind of the culture like? Do guys want to bounce back and forth, or just?
Guys usually don't want to bounce back and forth. The guys
they kind of find their niche.
Yeah, guys that gravitate towards that, just kicking indoors and doing the direct action mission, they usually want to kind of hang out there. And if they have to go back to like a regular team, like, oh man, because being on a regular team is kind of, it's enough leeway where you can be on a team that wants to be really good at everything. And then usually the team will take on the personality of its leadership.
Yeah.
As far as what they want to focus on, for skills. I was lucky though. The first team I went to, the company that was tasked with just doing direct action, they fell under the theater. And so the theater could put them wherever they wanted to. The group couldn't. And so the theater, for whatever reason, I don't remember why, they had them go sit in the Horn of Africa. I guess there was something hot then. So these guys were basically on strip alert, hanging out, lifting weights, shooting paper. And so, but my battalion still needed a direct action team. And so they took my team and another team, gave us a team sergeant that came from the direct action companies, and he did our train up. And luckily, coming from Ranger Regiment, I was like, okay, I know this stuff.
Yeah.
The rest of SF stuff I'm brand new on, but like my baseline's definitely kicking indoors and being aggressive.
Yeah.
So we actually did that we were a direct action team for my first 2 months in country.
Oh, okay. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. It was fun.
So you got to see kind of both sides of it.
Yeah, it was cool. And then like basically, I don't want to say exactly overnight. This is like early 2003. They were like, hey, the Coalition Provisional Authority wants to stand up a Iraqi army, and they want to start with Iraqi SOF. So we have all these different militias that were anti-Saddam. You guys are going to go like make contact with them, train them, and then start doing missions as soon as possible. So we went from like, being on the direct action path where we just go out at night and, do our thing, take bad guys off the battlefield, to like, we're working in 4-man teams with like a bunch of not really vetted Iraqis. And
well, that's what I was just going to say. Like, I mean, how many incidents did you hear about guys that were being trained blowing themselves up?
Oh, yeah.
Or grabbing a gun and shooting U.S. troops on the range? It's like, and it's almost impossible. How do you vet someone in Iraq? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, especially early on, we didn't know anybody.
Yeah. And it just seems like just a ticking time bomb, you know?
You're really counting on, I think, their circumstances being so bad that they're like, well, I guess if I work with the Americans, you know, this is how I can better my life.
Yeah.
You know, but then again, all you need is one or two guys in there that are like, oh, they're going to let me in.
Yeah.
Great.
And I've talked about it on the show before. You see Iraqis flip back and forth.
Oh yeah.
Just depending on needs of their family. And I mean, can you really fault them for it?
No, I mean,
yeah.
I mean, I kid around with people, but it's serious. I think the biggest growth industry for young men in Iraq and Afghanistan and probably Syria and Libya and stuff now is, you know, are you a capable militant? Like, do you know how to build an IED? Like, can you go fight? And if you know a bunch of other people and you can quickly marshal them, like to whatever cause is going to pay the most money.
Yeah.
Like you can be fairly successful. You know? That's just the economy that's been created by, you know, constant war.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is funny. Like I was actually talking about this last night with a group of friends. There's an element of young men, or like a percentage of young men that don't even care about what the political landscape is.
Right.
It's just, hey, let's go fight each other.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so I joke because a lot of Rangers could have cared less why they found themselves deployed.
Oh yeah, for sure.
They just wanted to deploy.
Yeah.
Who cares what the political landscape is?
Yep.
And then, I mean, the proof is in the pudding on the other side. You got foreign fighters coming from all over the world to fight the infidels.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing on the other side. They're
Right.
just young men that have a belief system and they want to mix it up.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, I had this discussion over the years a bunch of times, but, you know, some frustrations with like training up local soldiers, you know, they weren't as dedicated and motivated as we were. And I was like, hey man, I think most of the guys that we can relate to that just want to go fight and will give up everything. I think we're fighting each other.
That's right.
I don't think it's the guys that are here that are just like, hey, what are we getting free shoes?
Yeah.
Like, you guys are paying me this week, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. It's not those guys. It's the dudes that are like, they're willing to stay up late, get up early, make some sacrifices. You know, 'cause they want to come get us just like we want to come get them.
And you got to respect it.
Yeah. And you kind of got to respect it too at the same time. You're like, oh,
Even though you're like shitheads, like
these guys are scumbags. Can't wait to shoot them. But at the same time, like, right on, man.
yeah, no, I get it.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah. I remember seeing, I mean, there's been a bunch of videos circulating around when that was like a big part of the US's mission set in Iraq was training up the military.
Yeah.
And just what a shit show it was. Just trying to get those guys to do jumping jacks in cadence.
Yeah. I mean, so much of it was just that I think SF, because we had guys that had a lot of experience in the Middle East. We didn't go in with the US mentality, really. You know, we knew that we needed to get these guys capable enough to take care of their own security issues. And that they were usually much better off at finding who the bad guys were, you know, than making a very pretty US style raid or ambush or whatever.
Oh yeah.
But then once it became a massive effort by the US Army and the Marines to like train up these forces, you know, you just saw people trying to make little tiny Fort Bennings, you know, in the middle of Ramadi.
Yeah.
And you're like, man, I don't think drill and ceremony is exactly what these guys need right now. Like, and I don't think you're ever going to get them to all kind of get online and use disciplined fire and maneuver. Like it's kind of going to be a little bit chaotic every time. That's just, it is what it is.
Leave it to the big army to have that be the vision, though. You know?
Oh yeah, exactly. I remember that at one point they were importing. We actually got partnered up with some good guys with great intention, but they were like reservist drill sergeants who their active duty time every year was going and being drill sergeants over the summer, and they brought those guys in to help train
overseas.
Yeah, and they
I thought that was a non-deployable position.
So did a lot of them, and so they showed up, but their job was to help train up like the big Iraqi army, and I was just like, man, I don't know what we're doing. This is not going to be successful. And of course it wasn't, you know.
Man. When were you in Ramadi?
So I was in Ramadi a bunch in 2004.
Okay.
We came out, so we were based in Baghdad. We had the Iraqi Special Forces, the Iraqi commandos. And so we'd bring them out there, usually for like politically sensitive targets that they wanted to put an Iraqi face on. So if it was like a big mosque, essentially, we'd have the Iraqis go, we'd combat advise them.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, I was in Ramadi 2004 and 2005.
Yeah.
Living out of Blue Diamond.
Blue Diamond and then Shark Base or Shark Fin or whatever. Yeah, man.
Crazy times,
Dude,
man.
Ramadi was nuts, man. Ramadi and Fallujah. We were in Fallujah again in 04, and like, out west was a whole different ball game.
Yeah. And that was it was after I got out of the regiment and I was contracting.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so I was with Triple Canopy.
Oh, you were there in the Uber gangster days.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was funny because it was just so Triple Canopy ran like a little mini selection.
Yeah.
Just to join the company.
Yeah.
And it was like I think it was 3 weeks, but it was shooting and PT. And then obviously they're also training you up at the same time on the PSD mission.
Yeah.
And they liked Rangers because we could shoot and we were fit.
Yeah.
And we were good at keeping our eyes open and our mouths shut.
Yep, exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
And so I got there at like 23 years old.
Yeah.
And it was like a bunch of CAG dudes and a couple SF guys. And then like young Ranger.
Yeah.
And it ended up being the best thing that ever happened to me because I was like just living with all these dudes that like to this day I look up to, you know?
Yeah.
And it's funny because as I sit here now, I'm older than they were when they were my team leader, you know? But still is like, look at those guys like they were gods, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
But I mean, what a cool environment to grow up in, you know? Like,
absolutely.
It was really fun. And like you said, it was the Wild West days.
It was super. Yeah, it was before. I think nowadays there's way more. I think oversight on what goes on. You know, there's a lot more like tracking each individual unit where they are. Back then, there was a lot of like just kind of go out and figure it out.
Yeah.
You know, and then just talk to whoever's there when you get there, and kind of make sure you deconflict at that level. You know.
Yeah, even like before that, when I was in the regiment, we would go on patrols. And I was an E5.
Yeah.
And I'd take my team. It was not even a squad size patrol. I could tell my PL, hey, sir, I want to take my team and a gun team. And we're going to go to this ridge line. We're going to set a patrol base in here. It's like, all right, have fun. Check in on SATCOM at these predetermined times and you're good to go. Yep. And I look back on that now as like a 22-year-old E5 just doing whatever we wanted in Afghanistan. We'd walk down to the Kunar River and throw frags in to get fish and fry them up on the shore. And it's like, I have buddies that went to the unit after that and they're like, dude, that deployment to this day is the fucking craziest deployment I've ever been on. And we didn't fire one shot. There was no combat on that deployment. Yeah. But it was just like, it was so hands off. Just out there. And dude, and we like rode horses around the mountains and stuff. Like, we'd go into Pakistan. I guess you weren't supposed to do that.
I mean, everybody else in the area does. So
I know, right?
You? Yeah.
Then I tell people, I was like, there's locals that live there. Yeah. That don't even know like what side of the border they live on. Right. This is just their little village that they've lived in their whole life. Yeah. You know? Some like arbitrary line. Yeah. Yeah. So. Yeah, it's funny, man, because I would tell guys towards the end of my career, things got way more, controlled. You had to do like a big permission process of con ops, and we had to have different levels of ability to track the troops and lay on like all kinds of support to go out and do one mission. I'm like, dude, we didn't used to do any of this stuff. I'm like, back in the day on just an ODA, if we're gonna go out and do like a close target recon somewhere, like we'd write our name and our cell phone numbers and like take a radio like on the little whiteboard in the team house and be like, hey, we're gonna go look at this target and see if we can hit it tonight. And everybody would be like, all right, cool. And then that's so cool. But now it's like a huge process and stuff. So I think we couldn't have planned it any better. Yeah. To be part of the whole transition from peacetime to wartime. Yeah. There was a lot of, even senior leaders didn't understand what like real combat deployments were like. Yeah. And so everybody kind of figured it out together. Yeah. It was really cool. Yeah. And it was. Because there was no frame of reference. I mean, even I thought like when we missed out on the whole like jump into Afghanistan. That was it. I was like, well, that was the Panama for my generation. Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? Because like that was what, 2001 before since then it had been like 89. Yep. So I was like, man, there's a whole generation of dudes that if they missed that, they totally missed out, And so I kind of thought like, man, was that it? Did I just miss out? And like little did I know. Everybody thought that. Yep. Everyone was so worried that they weren't going to get their piece of the pie. Yeah. And here we are 20 years later. Yeah. And it's still going on. It's still going on. Yeah. Which is a whole different conversation. Yeah. It's nuts, man. Yeah. So then you did a full 20 years, huh? I did. Yeah. Yeah. I retired in 2018. Okay. Yeah. Man. I was thinking about doing the career thing, and I actually went into aviation. Oh, did you? Really? After the regiment, and I became a warrant officer.
Oh, damn.
I was down at Fort Rucker in flight school.
Yeah.
And I hemorrhaged my retina doing CrossFit.
Oh, crap.
And they med dropped me.
And now you have a CrossFit gym.
Yeah, we're sitting in a CrossFit gym. Yeah, I joke CrossFit probably saved my life because a lot of birds went down.
Yeah.
You know?
So you hemorrhaged a retina doing.
Yeah.
Wow.
I was doing wall push-ups. So my handstand push-ups, my feet up against the wall.
Yeah, yeah.
All that pressure in your head. Yeah. And I went partially blind in my left eye and it freaked me out because I was like, am I having a stroke? Like, what's going on? And so I went to the hospital and they took an image of my eye and they said, no, it's just blood that pooled up when you hemorrhage your retina. So it causes a blind spot. You can't see through the part that the blood is pooled up in. Yeah. And they said an injury to your eye in flight school, you're done. You're done, yeah. They said, so we can med you out of the military or we can reclass you. And I was like, I'll just get out. Yeah, yeah. You know? Yeah, for sure. But come to find out, if they offer you a different position, that's how they don't have to pay you a medical retirement. Oh, so I didn't know. So you didn't get a medical retirement? I got nothing. Oh, damn. Yeah. Oh, man. So that's how they get around that. Because they said you could still reclass into these MOSs. Oh, okay. But I was already a warrant. So I was like, what do I want to do? And I know SF has warrants and that's it, right? Outside of that, I don't want to be a warrant. I want to do anything else as a warrant. No, probably not. Flight and SF, I think are kind of it. I mean, there's some cool intel warrant programs, but very different. It's not, it's not anything that you'd want to do coming out of Ranger Regiment for sure. Dude, being a warrant is bizarre because you're not really an officer, right? But people are saluting you. It just feels weird. Yeah, I mean, I was a warrant for almost 10 years. Oh, were you? Okay. The entire time it was weird. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's the best secret in the Army, though. It's the best gig ever, man. You're getting officer pay. Yep. Without necessarily officer responsibility. Because I don't want to be a company commander or whatever, Yeah. Now, SF and aviation are the two where you can actually still be in command. Everybody else is just supposed to be like a subject matter expert. Yeah. So SF and aviation, you can actually be a commander. And so did you have command positions then? Briefly. So I was assistant team leader was mostly it, or executive officer of a troop. Got it. Was kind of my gig. Rutgers the only walks course, right? SF has their own. Oh, you had okay. So damn. SF guys starting in 06 started their own one because they would send guys down to Rucker. And it was the dumbest thing they've ever done in their life. And it was terrible. And then they'd tell their buddies, and we had a huge issue of recruiting SF guys to go warrant because the average SF guy when he goes warrant's a E7. Got it. So a bunch of guys were like, I am not shaving my head and going to Rucker and no, not doing it. It was the dumbest course I've ever been to in my entire life. I don't understand the military sometimes, how they structure these courses. Yeah. This is supposed to be a leadership course. Right. But it's a lockdown course. Yeah. So, and I remember talking to the cadre about it. I was like, why is the Army so fixated on lockdown schools when they're supposed to be leadership schools? Yeah. If you can't expect, or you can't trust me to be here at 5 a.m. for morning PT, I have no business being a leader, right? You're going to give me a helicopter? Yeah. And that's what the cadre said. They're like, Anderson, if we let this be an open course and you had to show up every morning, we'd graduate about half of the candidates that we need to. I was like, damn. But we had to have, you had to have a mascot that you created. Each platoon had its own mascot. Yeah. And then you had to make your PT gear with your mascot on it. And you had to have a matching. We were the Blue Angels, so everyone had to have blue hats. They had to have blue shoelaces in there, and then you had to get in formation before every meal and sing a song. Oh, Jesus! And the song had to change. I think it's every couple days or once a week. And it's like a summer camp. Oh, it was bizarre, like a militant summer. And camp. I'm like, what are we doing here? And the commander would sit up like a scene out of Gladiator. If the song was good, thumbs up, you're granted access to the chow hall. Thumbs down, you're going to sing it again. And you better do better this time. Wow. And then we would all sit at the tables and everyone would have to eat like a robot. Oh, wow. Everyone at they were tables with 4 people and you'd have to stand up in unison, right or left face in unison. And it was just bunch of bizarre stuff.
Yeah.
So here's a funny story about the warrant officer course. We had land nav, and it's the easiest land nav course you've ever done, right? And at the end of the land nav, they had us all get in formation. They're like, if we call your name, you're a land nav no-go, and you have to stay and retrain, and you'll redo the course tomorrow. They're calling everyone. They call my name. And I was like, there's no way I was a no-go. What are you talking about? And they pulled me aside and they said, hey, you had the fastest time and you got all your points right. And we're wondering if you could run the retraining.
Nice.
And so, I went out there and did land nav with a bunch of people that have never even held a compass and a map before.
That's a total warrant officer trick right there. Whoever your instructor was like, get someone else to do your work.
yeah, exactly. And so that was day land nav. And then when we did night land nav, they partnered us up in groups of 3 because otherwise they'd have
groups of 3.
They'd have people out in the middle of nowhere that would still be out there to this day.
I'm sure, yeah.
And so I told the other 2 people I was with, I was like, listen, we're just going to dead reckon, and I'm just going to stare at my compass the whole time and count my pace count and just follow like ducks in a row right behind me. They're like, okay. And so I count and I get to off of my pace count to where the point should be. And I stop. I was like, all right, this should be where our point's at. Let's start spiraling out from here, you know? And dude, I looked to the left and it was like, the post was like 2 feet away from me. And they're like, oh, how did I never seen anything? And I was like thinking,
magic.
Yeah, I haven't really seen anything like this either. Like you never get that close, you know?
Yeah, this is how it goes every time.
Yeah, it's like, it's just part of being a ranger, you know?
This compass works really good for me.
So, yeah, but that was a ridiculous course. Yeah. Like, I just feel like the Army could spend their time a lot better than having us sing songs and have matching shoes and shit, you know?
Yeah, you'd hope some of that would change with like years of war, but it probably hasn't.
Well, I mean, and that was a long time ago too, so who knows what they're doing now, but...
Yeah. I would hope they're not out buying shoelaces or...
Yeah. Fort Rucker was cool though. I mean, I didn't... I injured my eye within the first month of flight school.
Wow.
So... outside of a simulator that I crashed every time, I didn't even get any flight time or any real knowledge or anything. So, but those Black Hawk simulators, you realize how much knowledge goes into that skill set.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even know. There's 300 switches and buttons and knobs and both hands and both feet are working. Like, it's pretty crazy.
I got a chance in 2005 to fly a Kiowa.
Okay.
So we were working with I think it was the 3rd Armored Cavalry Division. And so they had Kiowas they'd send out as reconnaissance. And we were looking at some places on the Syrian border that like foreign fighters were coming across the border on. But we really couldn't get out and do reconnaissance out there because these places are just in the middle of the freaking desert. You get compromised right away. You couldn't do the typical like hop into a little, Hilux pickup truck or whatever. So, but there was consistent flights going over, so the population was pretty used to that. So there were some flight warrants that landed on our base, and then I think 2 of them were W5s or 4s that had been instructors down there, so they could fly solo.
Okay.
So they would usually just like stack sandbags in to make it balanced. And we were just making small talk with them one day, talking about like we had to get out to the desert somewhere, and they're like, "Dude, you could just jump in the passenger seat." I was like, "We can do that?" They were like, "Yeah." So we're out there for cameras, taking pictures of stuff we had to take pictures of. And then the guy's like on the headset, just like this. He's like, "Hey, man, do you want to fly this thing?" And I was like,
"You're damn right, I do."
Like, "Hell yeah!" And he's like, "All right, hang on." And he took us way, way, way up.
So he had plenty of time to correct anything.
He's like, "We're high enough right now. Like, there's nothing you can do to this helicopter that like I can't fix." And so he gave me like a 5-minute class. He's like, "All right, you hold these little things down there." He like pressed a button that activated my cockpit. He's like, you hold the feet things steady, and then man, I couldn't hold that thing steady to save our lives.
Isn't that crazy?
Dude, it was incredibly difficult, like, and way more physical than I thought it was too. Because you just have to. You're kind of balancing on your chair in this weird angle. I'm sure eventually your body adapts. But I mean, I thought it was pretty challenging, man.
Yeah, no, and I was thinking maybe going into the 160th after that, just because. And that's a natural path for Rangers, and they actually, it wasn't a recruiter. It was one of the cadre had flown for 160th.
Yeah.
And he pulled me aside and he goes, hey, coming from regiment, you'll be able to go right into 160th if you want to.
Yeah. Cause you speak the language.
Yeah. And he goes, plus what they're finding is if you already are cut out, if you're the right type of guy to be with that unit, they're finding if they get you when you're younger, that they don't have to unteach a bunch of bad habits that you learn in regular like aviation units.
Yeah, I can see that.
And so, it's just so crazy how one little thing changes the whole trajectory of your life.
Completely, man.
You know,
for sure.
First it was a CrossFit workout, and second was a video that I in my patrol car. You know,
exactly.
So it's crazy.
Yeah, man.
And so you got out in 2018, and I mean, the whole reason I was excited to have you on is to talk about your new aspirations in politics. So how did that transition look coming out of the military and now?
Yeah. So it actually wasn't much of a transition. I got out of the military in 18 and then so I retired on a Friday. And then Monday morning, I swore in at CIA.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was there, as a paramilitary guy for about a year. That was my plan, was to go spend another 20 years there kind of doing that gig. But unfortunately, later on that year, so 2019, my wife was killed in Syria by ISIS. So she was she was a Navy cryptological, a lot of Navy linguists working with the unit out of Bragg. Yeah, so she was killed. So I had to resign from the government altogether to take care of the kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, I can't even imagine. Like, raising a family is hard enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
In a 2-parent household, you know?
Yeah, especially with little ones.
Man. Yeah, I saw and obviously I wasn't going to bring it up. You could take this conversation wherever you're comfortable with, but I saw on your Instagram, like the little thing, the picture at Arlington.
Yeah.
Man, so who was she with then? She was in the Navy?
Yeah, she was in the Navy, but she was assigned, she was from the NSA, but she was working with with Delta, the guys at Bragg.
Got it.
Yeah. Yeah, so she was part of the task force that was over there going after ISIS. So she was an Arabic linguist.
Got it.
Like kind of dual-hatted humanter and a SIGINTer. Yeah. Yeah.
Man, I would look at that situation. I'm sure there's a part of you that like makes you want to go back more than anything. Yeah. Yeah,
for sure, man. And I was actually overseas myself on a short trip when she was killed. So I got notified there that she was killed. I knew where she was because we could communicate on the system. So I had to actually do like part of the notification myself. I had to call her parents and tell them that she had been killed and then come back home. But as I was flying home, I was like, well, I got to pick a different thing to do for a living because I have kids. If I didn't have kids, then, I would have been first thing smoking to Syria. But having kids, I was like, I can't.
How old were the boys when that happened?
They were 1.5 and 3. So
dang.
Yeah. So they were really young.
I'm sorry, man. That's one of those things. It's like you can't even wrap your head around what that experience must be like for you.
Yeah. It's there's different depths to it, like kind of every day. Like you're so busy that first like almost year of just rearranging your life, and then coming to terms with losing my wife. It's weird. Every day is something kind of new.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm sure it's going to be one of those things that will never become normal or become acceptable.
Yeah. It's like it's weird because like the culture that we come from, we're used to losing friends. We lose friends every year. Hopefully someday soon we stop losing friends over there.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of become, I'd say, almost numb to it. You lose guys, and every year you add new names to the memorial wall, bracelets, tattoos, all that stuff. And it becomes part of the culture. And then like losing Shannon, and having her as like one of those names, it's really surreal, because I'm familiar with all the rituals because it's part of our culture.
Yeah.
Of how we memorialize our dead and all that. But then having her as part of that as also my wife and mother of my kids, like it's really surreal and just kind of hard to wrap my head around.
Is it okay if I ask some questions about her?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I mean, obviously this is a topic that
Yeah, definitely.
We don't know each other, and we're just hanging out for the first time in 20 years. Man. But just to hear a little bit about her story.
Yeah.
Like, how did you guys meet?
So we met after I left. I was in 5th group for about 10 years. And then I went to another selection to go to a unit that does, that kind of combines special operations and intelligence. And so we met there. So she came over from the Navy side. We ended up in a course together, another like year-long course. So we ended up working together there, and then moved pretty quick, started dating, and then about a year later got married and had kids. And then we both just stayed there in the DC area. She planned on switching over her career trajectory. She had gotten into a psychology program through the Navy, but kind of like a catch-22. She had cancer and beat it real briefly. She had cancer cut out of her thyroid when I was in Iraq in 2016. But that disqualified her from becoming an officer. So she was an E7. And so,
oh, really?
Yeah. So to become a psychologist, they put you through like that little mini, what's it called? Officer candidate school. And so you're held to military accession standards, not retention standards. So if you're like when they offered you to reclass because of your eye, they'll keep you. They won't let you do every job. So according to the Navy, Shannon was fit to go deploy to Syria with special operations, but she wasn't qualified to go sit in a classroom as a psychologist. So our master plan was to have her go become a psych. And then I had already told her that I planned on going over to the agency, and she was supportive of that.
Man, it's crazy. In the military, like, not that you can cast stones or blame anything, because it is, I mean, it just, the cards fall where they fall, but it's just such a typical, you hear stories about that kind of stuff all the time. Yeah. It's just the inability to think outside of the box. Right. Just like you said, like she can go deploy with a special operations unit. Yeah. But she's medically unfit to sit in a chair and talk to people.
Sit in a classroom, right.
It's so bizarre.
Yeah. Yeah, man.
So then after that, and you decided, hey, I'm putting all this stuff behind me. Yeah. What was moving forward after that like?
So after that, it was kind of weird.
I mean, that's your whole life. Yeah. It was that world.
And I had never thought of transition, man. I mean, people talk about transition a lot, and I was like, I'm going to skirt around that, and I'm going to go over to the civilian job. It's very similar. A lot of guys make that jump. Yeah. It's pretty natural. I know it sounds like really cool. Like, oh, I went to the CIA or whatever, but like coming from our culture and our community, it's fairly normal.
Yeah, I know a lot of guys that did that.
Yeah, which I'm sure a lot of people watching right now are like, that's not normal at all. But
I have heard that their selection is legit.
It's pretty legit.
So did you do the one where you had to like pack your bag every single morning? Yeah. And you never knew what day you were on the chopping block and guys would just disappear?
Pretty much. Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of that. Yeah. Yeah. Both at the unit I went to after 5th group, and then the one at the agency is a little more laid. I'd say it's laid back, but they still end up cutting a lot of people. They're nice to you the whole time, but they still cut a lot of people. Yeah. So yeah,
there's a lot of CQB stuff, or
they want to make sure that you're tactically proficient. So I mean, it's the agency. They do a good job of hiring experts, and if your resume says that you can shoot, move, communicate, they go test you.
Yeah, they expect you to be able to shoot, move, and communicate.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. They want to make sure it's not something you were really good at like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's an awesome place to work. It was my dream job. So it was weird transitioning away from all that to being a like stay-at-home dad and all that. But what kind of put me on the trajectory I'm on right now is I've always been interested in politics, especially how much war that we saw. Like, so we were on the pointy end of foreign policy. Yeah. And I'd say probably a lot of foreign policy failures. I mean, we talked about like, it's a great time. And I always tell people I'd go back to war tomorrow if I could. That doesn't mean that like it was the wars that we fought were necessarily the smartest things or the best things for our country. Yeah.
And also the war, losing your wife through it. Yeah. I'm sure that has to make you look at it through a slightly different lens. Yeah. Just because, again, it's like war is fun and it's wild, and just like you said, I think that I could still go back tomorrow too, like, let's go. Right. But at the same time, the other side of the coin is all the destruction, how many families have been ruined, and like how much pain it's caused. And as you get older, you look back on that stuff and think, Like, was the juice worth the squeeze?
Right.
Was it necessary?
Yeah. Was it
Should we have
necessary?
been there?
Yep.
And when I think about that kind of stuff, it makes me, I have to be honest and have an objective look of what we've accomplished versus the amount of Americans that we've lost.
Yeah.
It doesn't really seem like it makes sense, you know?
No, I don't think it does.
And then I did a podcast about this a couple weeks ago when those people just rushed into the Capitol, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think what they did was reasonable, and I'm not supporting it. But one of my big takeaways is we saw a lot of political leadership cowering in fear.
Yeah.
Falling to the ground, covering their head.
Yep.
And it was kind of like a profound moment for me, because it made me think about, like, the people in that room who are signing the dotted line to send guys like you and I to the other side of the world to shoot people.
Yeah.
But they're such cowards in their own hearts that when a group of people with their face painted walks in, they're trembling on the ground.
Yeah.
And it makes you have to take a step back and be like, the system's broken.
Absolutely, man. Yeah.
It is broken.
Yeah. That same room, a lot of those same representatives just a couple of months ago were criticizing Trump for trying to get us out of wars. Were putting forth legislation to make sure that he couldn't withdraw troops from Afghanistan or Syria. Just insane. So that was kind of, I've had a couple different, moments where I'm like, hey, I should get involved in politics. My first one was almost immediately after Shannon was killed. So she was killed in January of 19, December of 18. So just a month and a half before, Trump tried to pull us out of Syria. He said, hey, we've met our military objective. We took away the territorial caliphate. We're not going to get sucked into an enduring conflict in Syria. And for me, I was like, well, that's what he campaigned on, for one.
Yeah.
Two, I couldn't agree more. Like the fact that, like, there is Sunni militants of various flavors that exist between basically Baghdad and Damascus.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to continue to happen until a bunch of different things change, and none of those things are in the control of the U.S., in particular U.S. troops on the ground. So I strongly agreed with what he said. However, the military, starting with, Secretary of Defense Mattis, Brett McGurk, who was from the State Department, who was in charge of the ISIS coalition, like, they did their slow roll, hashtag resistance, we're going to resign and make this into a huge political thing and disobey the president. That left, troops in Syria. So I got a chance to meet President Trump, unfortunately, at Dover when my wife's body was being returned.
Mm-hmm.
And his staff came by before, and they're like, hey, if any of the families want to meet with the president individually, you can. I think all of us took him up on it. So I got to talk to Trump probably for 2 or 3 minutes alone before other people came into the room. And I got to talk to him total for about probably 10 minutes or so. And so
what was that experience like?
It was good, man. It was really good. He was very gracious, and, he had done his homework. He knew who Shannon was. He knew she was from New York. Very compassionate. But I when he dug into, hey, who are you? And I told him, I was like, hey, I think what you're doing is right. Your outlook on the war on terror and especially Syria, like, you're spot on. You're not going to hear that from a lot of people. And there's a lot of people at that point had been, in the agency for a little bit, but coming out of the military, I knew there was a lot of folks at the mid to senior levels that thought they knew better than him.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd already seen that from the Mattis resigning, McGurk resigning, and all that. So I told him that, and sort of from that point forward began I don't want to, like, overinflate it, but in very informal relationship with, like, the Trump administration, just usually writing op-eds and saying, hey, because Trump would put something out about foreign policy, usually about getting us out of the wars, and then being tough on Iran, stuff like that. And then you'd have all these talking heads who are so-called experts, the same people that, said that there was weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. There was Al-Qaeda in Iraq before with Saddam, that said that we should be nation building in Afghanistan. They would come out and say, well, this man's a buffoon. He has no idea what he's talking about. And it's like, well, you guys actually have no idea what you're talking about because your record sucks.
Yeah.
He's at least trying something new. And so that's kind of what was the catalyst to get me involved heavily in politics.
Wow. And, I got out of the deploying life in like 2009.
Yeah.
That was my last deployment. So I was pretty far removed from that stuff for the better part of a decade now, or over a decade. But any of the guys, all my buddies that stayed in and were part of this just ongoing conflict and were there, boots on the ground, like you said, losing friends, you lost your wife, like you're intimately familiar with what's taking place. Yeah. All the guys that I know that share your same sentiment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not like you're not sitting around the table and having like these back and forth discussions. It's almost universal.
It's not a philosophical debate with us. I mean, I think we're very like results oriented type of people to begin with. Mm-hmm. But then we've been out there literally conducting our own research and living this and losing friends and going to these places and even talking to locals. You know, you just at some point, a switch gets flicked in your head where you're like, this isn't working. We have to try something new. But then you hear from all the so-called experts who say, no, we have to stay the course. And, you hear lots of dismissive stuff like, oh, we haven't lost that many people. It's like, well, actually we've lost almost 7,000 if you combine the two wars.
Yeah.
And
and losing one.
Yeah.
For here's the thing. If we need to invade the beaches like we did in Normandy,
right,
and we lose thousands of men, but that needs to happen.
Right.
Let's do it.
Absolutely.
I don't think any guy like us would say otherwise.
Yeah.
But if you lose one person for something that was unnecessary or unreasonable, that's one too many. Exactly. So to say we didn't lose too many people.
Yeah. It hasn't cost that much.
You.
Exactly. Yeah. Fuck off. That's, it's very frustrating to see how stagnated we are with that mentality on a bunch of things, but in particular our foreign policy.
Yeah. And another thing, like you talk to anybody that's still in the military, everybody was happy being in the military under the Trump administration.
Yeah.
Yep. It was for a whole conglomerate of reasons, like pulling out of certain areas, better funding, better training, just taking care of the troops. Yeah. And I've heard that time and time again. So
yeah. He cut away a lot of the hallmark for me of the latter part of the Bush era and then the 8 years of Obama was the deployments are still coming. We really can't articulate why we want to be in these places. And we don't really necessarily want there to be heavy fighting, but we still want you over there, which, as you know, if you're over there, you're a combatant. Like fighting is going to come to you. How you choose to react, that's kind of up to you and your chain of command.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. And so under the Obama era, even the latter part of the Bush era, like we were just sort of there. When Trump took over, he was like, he had very clear military objectives. That's why defeating the territorial caliphate of ISIS, it's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. The U.S. military can wrap their heads around that and free the commanders up. Like anywhere those idiots put their little black flag up, like we crush it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then once it's done, we've seen for the last however many years at that point, we're on a decade and a half, the reconstruction part, we don't do that well. It's complicated. And even if we could do it well, would it really be worth it? And so I think the business side of Trump kicked in and he was like, no, we took out the territorial caliphate. They can't pose a threat, as much of a threat anymore. Like, let's get the hell out of here.
Yeah.
And then same thing in Afghanistan. Like there was
why would thinking of doing anything any different
exactly
make sense to anyone?
Yeah.
Like the military objective is taken out. So our necessity for our military to be there should no longer exist.
Yeah. Get the military out. Because at that point, if you just hang out, you're basically just having your guys stay static as targets.
Yeah.
Waiting for somebody else to act.
Well, and like I've talked about it a lot. Like we got mortared daily.
Yeah.
You got people sitting in hooches with bombs dropping on their head.
Right.
Around the clock.
Yeah.
7 days a week, It's just bizarre that we found ourselves where we have, Yeah. And then for someone like Trump to come along and start to move the needle in a direction that at least all of my friends that are veterans and that we're still in were finding to be beneficial. Yeah. He's just getting demonized for it.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like, well, what's really going on here? Because it makes, because I've never been like, you hear about like the military industrial complex and how war is a business and it's for profit. And you have to kind of take a step back and be like, well,
yeah.
I hated to hear that kind of stuff when I was in.
Yep.
Because it diminishes what you feel you're a part of.
Exactly.
Like, no, I'm changing. Like, I'm fucking taking out the enemies of our country.
Yeah. I think the dirty underbelly does have a bunch of financial incentives to keep the wars going along. And I think a lot of what we're seeing right now of keeping the troops over there and then attempting to keep this constant military presence that's distracting us from a real adversary like China. I think there's some dirty money that's involved in a lot of that. I think a lot of that's becoming clear of like tech censorship and who these big companies and corporations are choosing to back. I think in general though, with like the foreign policy and national security establishment, I think a lot of it's human nature. Or like if you've taken a really hard position on something, especially one that's been costly like a war, it's really hard for you to say like, actually guys, I was wrong. I screwed up, you know, like it's easier just to double down. That's why casinos are built, right?
Yeah. I hate that though, because one of the most powerful things that you can do as a leader is say, my bad.
Yeah, totally.
You know what I'm saying? Like, just like what we talked about when we first started, like the war was new, not only for us as young E3s and E4s, but everybody up the chain of command, all the way to the president of the United States.
Yeah.
You know, it's okay to make mistakes.
Yeah.
And learn from them and be open about, like, can you imagine if we had politicians that own their mistakes and were genuinely like apologetic about the things that they did wrong?
It'd be amazing.
Like it would be amazing.
Yeah.
And it's the pendulum swung so far the other direction that when you get someone like Nancy Pelosi who gets caught in a salon when everything's supposed to be locked down, she demands an apology from them.
Yeah.
And that's how out of touch these people are with reality.
Yep.
Like, just use it as an opportunity to be like, listen, I messed up.
I messed up and hey, maybe these lockdowns are a terrible idea.
Yeah, exactly. You know, yeah, exactly. Like, you know, it made me realize that I'm asking you guys to live in a certain manner that's even impossible for me to live in.
And I just didn't see it. Yeah, exactly.
And it opened my eyes to how unreasonable some of these things are.
Yeah.
And the only thing that I could do right now is apologize and then try and straighten things out.
Exactly.
You know, like that's what she could have done.
Exactly.
And even guys like us who probably aren't her biggest fan would be like, oh, dude, she owned that. That's cool. You know what I mean?
Yeah. If she owned it and would have gone and been like, hey, I screwed this up. It wasn't sustainable for me. And I can't imagine what this business owner's gone through. Yeah. Like, let's look at how we can intelligently open the economy. I think even her biggest critics would have been like, okay. Yeah. I'm good with that. Yeah.
And it's the same thing with Newsom when he got caught having his dinner party.
Yeah.
You know, like, well, we were outside. So, well, and then a day or two later, the pictures came out. Oh, you weren't outside.
Right.
So you got caught and then you lied about it. And it's like, can you imagine if you were working under any type of like commander at any level?
Yeah, it just wouldn't fly. I mean,
that pulled something like that.
Yeah.
His career would be over.
Completely.
But somehow these people get to just continue perpetuating this stuff on us.
I mean, they have the media completely, almost completely. There's a couple, breaks in that facade, but in general, the media is almost always on their side, especially in the last 5 years when they had Trump to blame. They could just immediately be like, well, what Nancy did was bad, but did you see that Donald Trump tweeted something that offended me deeply? Yeah. Usually when he called them out on their own hypocrisy, but it's just such a, I mean, I hate to say it, but it's almost just a rigged system, that we have right now.
Yeah, it's a totally rigged system.
Yeah.
I mean, and again, the whole COVID thing was hard on a lot of people.
Yeah.
Like my best friend is a doctor and he was in New York during the height of the pandemic. So I've heard about how terrible it could be, right? Yeah. But don't think for a second that they didn't use that as an opportunity to manipulate people and scare people. And really, I mean, they took a country that was on a good trajectory and just turned it into a nosedive just for political aspirations.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, to benefit themselves, they're willing to let everybody fall by the wayside.
Completely. Yeah.
And it's just so crazy because guys like us that came up, I mean, like we were talking about, like Captain Donahue, like we worked under men that you look to as like, wow.
Yeah.
And Captain Donahue would have died for either one of us as a private.
Yeah.
You know?
I think he's in Afghanistan right now as a general. Like,
yes,
he's still out there getting after it.
And so we grew up in an area where we looked to our leadership and it was like, okay, they're hard on us. And sure, like we talked about hazing and stuff, but make no mistake about it.
Yeah. Those
people would have died for us.
100%. Yeah.
And now you look at like what we call leadership in America.
Yes.
I mean, go read one of Jocko's books or something. Like, you know, like
exactly,
they don't understand leadership in its most fundamental, basic levels, you know?
I feel like the political class is just demanding complete and total submission. You know, I mean, they have the media on board with them. They've been able to weaponize technology with big tech, with social media. They've made some very unholy alliances with corporations, you know, just to make it that if you speak out or you question them, you know, they can deplatform you. And then, you know, what's next? They did it to President Trump. Like they took Parler off of Amazon.
Yeah.
You know, that's like I think that's one of the biggest stories of the last couple of years. Just like a private company with all this power over how another private entity makes money. They're like, I don't like your political views. Like, okay, so what's next? I mean, are you going to decide that, you know, you don't like Joe and Greg and now we can't have bank accounts?
Yeah. No. And it's funny you say that because Mike Glover had a bunch of his money seized.
Yes.
Because they determined
that he was
up to nefarious activity. Sure. And it's like, no, he's not up to anything.
No.
He's exactly what Mike Glover puts out on his Instagram and on his news feeds. Like that's who he is and that's what he's doing.
Yeah. He's telling people to like, you know, be responsible adults and like how to put on a tourniquet. Like, it's like survival stuff. Like, yeah.
But if you're not in line with the narrative, you're an enemy now.
Exactly. And they've just, I think, gotten a lot of people who can't see beyond that to just comply because they don't want to get labeled as oh man, if I step out, they're going to call me an extremist, an insurrectionist, a terrorist, whatever. Oh, racist somehow.
Yeah. That's you can't forget that. That's the key word. If you aren't 100% in alignment, you're a racist.
You're racist.
And I was watching, and I hate to even admit this because I don't watch CNN very often, but I was just flipping through the channels.
You got to sometimes.
Oh, and it was what's his name? Don Lemon, and Chris Cuomo, who invited me on his show, by the way.
Really?
I turned it down.
Oh, good for you.
I want nothing to do with those guys. I knew it would have just gotten chopped up and no matter how well I spoke or how well the interview went, when they aired it on the evening news, I would have looked like a buffoon.
Right.
You know,
or they just this big scary man who like wants people to die of COVID.
Yeah, exactly.
This guy was in the military. He's a cop. Like,
yeah. But Don Lemon was like, if you voted for Trump, you voted for the party that supports the KKK. If you voted for Trump, you're aligning yourself with the Nazis.
Yeah.
If you voted for and just all of these like bullet points, like just trying to instill fear in people.
Yeah.
And it's like, actually, I know a lot of people who voted for Trump. Most of them don't care if you're gay or straight.
Right.
Most of them don't care what color your skin is.
Yeah.
Most of them don't care if you like what type of drugs you want to use.
Right.
Like there's a misconception. In my experience, conservatives don't give a shit what people are doing as long as you're not infringing on other people's rights. Yeah. You know, it's like, I don't know, man. It's a pretty simple concept. But now the conservative movement has been painted as like...
Yeah, January 6th, I think, didn't do the conservative movement any favors.
A handful
of individuals made some really poor choices that I think have been greatly exaggerated. Like
exaggerated.
To call them insurrectionists, I mean, I don't know.
I've talked about that a lot on the show. And it's like, what you had there was a bunch of goons.
Yeah.
That got caught up in mob mentality.
Right.
And if I was in that crowd and hey, bring it in, guys, listen up. People in that room. And like, you could give a William Wallace speech and get people fired up. Let's go. That's what that was.
That's it.
That's what that was. They wanted to talk about, they had plans to take over Congress. It's like, first of all, they weren't armed.
Right.
They didn't block off the points of ingress or egress.
Yeah, it wasn't much of a plan.
There was no contingency planning. There was no they didn't have their elements like divided into different elements and making like entry through multiple different points simultaneously, like some basic things that you would do if you were going to seize a building.
Yeah. And there's been obvious, I think conflicting guidance that was given out to the people who were charged with securing the building. You know, because there was times when prior protesters had gotten let into the building before. And then this one, there's footage of the cops having to letting people in. So yeah. I think it's still not very clear as to like, hey, what was the guidance there for the police officers? Did they know? You know, could they communicate with each other? You know, I'm sure a lot of them were just like, hey, what the hell are we supposed to do?
Yeah, exactly.
Like
it was a shit show.
Am I supposed to fight all these guys?
Yeah, exactly. Is deadly force authorized for somebody walking at me?
Right. Because you see the video of like the yoga or the Viking hat guy, the yoga instructor.
Yeah.
I mean, but there's that cop that lets them in, and he's like, "Hey guys, don't mess anything up here," you know. And it's like not a ding on that cop. Like those guys weren't acting violently, and so I think he was probably like, "Well, we let the Kavanaugh protesters in just a year ago. Like, what do we do?" I hear you. You know, from the military, we've seen big operations go down before, and if those coordinations aren't made and there isn't backup plans and a clear chain of command with communication, like. If you're the guy that has to make the individual decision, you're like, well, wait a second.
Yeah, what do I do?
No one told me what to do.
Yeah.
You know?
And I love that you brought that up because everybody uses every single just snippet of video footage to create a conspiracy.
Yeah.
And they're like, the cops were in on it and they were told to let people in.
Right,
and every time I hear that kind of stuff, I, as someone that was in military and paramilitary for a decade and then law enforcement for another decade, I was like, you guys are giving the government too much credit.
Way too much credit.
What you saw there was nothing more than miscommunication. Exactly what you said, you know?
And I mean, everybody, like when we plan things in the military, we go through like the enemy's most likely course of action and most dangerous course of action.
Mm-hmm.
Like the hallmark of the Trump administration was he holds these really big rallies. And in general, every single one, but that one, the participants are peaceful. You know, and there's two different rallies. There was the rally that happened in front where Trump spoke at, that was peaceful. And then the other one where the breach happened, you know, but if you were planning that ahead of time, you're like, okay, well, what usually happens at a Trump rally? Well, usually like it's peaceful and maybe Antifa will show up and there'll be some fist fights in the street. But I don't think it was on anyone's radar that they might penetrate the Capitol.
Yeah.
Or they just weren't creative enough to think like, okay, worst case scenario, let's plan for that.
Yeah.
I just felt like there was a lot of like most likely course of action development that went down and not a lot of like, we need to harden the hell out of this place. And so if you're a cop guarding it, you might've been like, well, do we let the protesters in or not? Like no one told me.
And I can tell you like from the law enforcement perspective, because I mean, half of my peers are still in the profession.
Yeah.
It's so offensive how all of a sudden our cops did an amazing job. We really appreciate how they put their lives on the line to protect us. It's a hard job and on and on and on and on and on about how great the police were. And only because it was a conservative based riot, even though we have, I mean, we're probably in the thousands of riots over the last year.
Yeah.
But when they're based on a liberal ideology, cops are the bad guys.
Exactly.
Cops are going to kill you. Cops hate black people.
Right.
Cops are racist. Cops are just itching to kill somebody. I mean, defund them.
Defund the police.
Like get rid of the police, on and on and on and on and on for a year. And then one incident from a conservative based movement and it's just flipped it 180 degrees. Like how stupid do they think people are? Yeah,
exactly.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, that was a pretty hard pivot. Like
it's just ridiculous.
Yeah. For however many, what is it, like 6, 7, 8 months now, it's supposed to, you know, all the cops are just out there systemically racist. They're hunting down young black men when like there's no statistics to prove that whatsoever.
No.
You know,
it's the stupidest thing in the world.
And absolutely demonizing police officers, asking them to do crazy things like enforce lockdown policies.
Yeah.
You know, and then, I mean,
which is all part of, I mean, it turned the public against the profession.
Completely.
And between that and the George Floyd thing, and again, dude, I still don't know the person that's like, George Floyd got what he deserved.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That was one cop that did one thing.
Right.
And again, just like we said about like your military family, if that's your family, I get it. Like, and it's a problem. But guess what? That's why those guys are in jail.
Right.
What else do you want us to do?
It's being dealt with. Yeah.
Like those guys are in custody and they're getting charged with murder.
Yeah.
And so suddenly every cop should be defunded and we don't need them anymore. And just, I mean.
Yeah. Just let the cities burn, and we'll just keep that going for political motivation.
Well, and again, it was like they jumped at the chance, just like they did with COVID, to really turn society into a nosedive.
Absolutely.
All of that was part of it too.
Yeah.
Like the riots and the discontent and the violence, like they fueled that fan.
Yeah. And that again is the media. And then you just have to look at who benefits and who's been pushing that message out.
All to get Trump out of office.
Yeah.
I mean, let's call a spade a spade. Does anybody think that that's not what was happening? There was a COVID death counter on CNN.
Yeah.
That was like ticking every second, just showing how many people are dying, And as soon as Biden was inaugurated, gone. Same day. Like, what? Wait, what? Yeah.
And it's coming out like the huge spike in New York and then a little one up in, Inslee territory. It's like, oh, well, that's because they were shoving them all the old people back into the nursing homes.
That's right.
When they were being warned not to. It's like, well, they kind of waited for that to come out. People had accused them of doing that before, but the media was crickets on. They wouldn't say anything until Trump's gone.
And then I don't know if you saw, it was Biden said it a couple days ago. He's like, the Hispanic and the African American community doesn't have the ability to get online.
To get on the internet.
And get on the internet.
Yeah.
And can you imagine if Trump said that?
Yeah. I mean, like nothing. He's never said anything even close to that.
Anything even remotely close to that.
Biden has like 40 years of those gaffes. Yeah. I mean, are they even gaffes at that point, or is that just like a pattern of behavior?
That's just, it's just who he is.
Yeah.
And just a blanket pass to say whatever he wanted.
Yeah.
If you didn't vote, if you're not voting for Biden, you ain't black.
You ain't black.
I can't even believe the stuff that it sometimes makes me feel like I'm just in a bad dream.
Yeah.
Like there's no way this is American politics at the highest level. There's no, I remember when they decided that he was going to be the candidate.
Yeah.
I remember thinking they must want to lose for some type of strategic positioning that allows them to come in with some powerhouse candidate in 2024. I was like, there's more going on here than meets the eye. Like and I'm not fucking on this 3D chessboard. You know what? I'm like, I'm on the outside looking in, trying to figure out what's going on. And then he won.
but that was why they had to have the COVID lockdowns continue. That was why they had to have chaos in the streets continue. And then they just poured gasoline on. I mean, Kamala Harris was raising funds to, bail out rioters.
Yeah.
And saying that the whatever she called it, the uprising should continue, stoking the flames.
There's a bunch of incidents of politicians on the left promoting it, the violence.
Yeah.
And like they should be held criminally for that.
Right. I mean, we just had a whole impeachment about Trump to go through, when he said march peacefully and patriotically, but somehow that incited the riot,
Did you see how angry Pelosi was when she came out and had to announce that he was acquitted?
Yeah. I mean, like the thing is though, they can't quit the guy. I mean, like
he's taking up real estate in their head. They should be like,
he is, man. Yeah.
He should be paying him rent, and
the media should be giving him royalties. Cause now if you watch the media, they're just like, well, what do we talk about? Like, can somebody give Trump his Twitter back maybe for a day?
What a bizarre time to just to being a fly on the wall and watching all of this unfold is just...
It's like a sociological experiment that's going on right now.
Yeah, if you would have said to us 2 years ago, like, hey, watch this movie. This movie's called 2020, it'd be like...
Episode of Black Mirror or something like that. You're like, there's a pandemic that locks everybody down, but doesn't really hurt that many people.
Yeah.
But everybody believes it and they stay away from each other.
It's so strange. And so obviously all of this stuff has just motivated you to get in the game then, huh?
It has. I think the last, year and a half or so, we've really seen the veil get lifted. I mean, I think we saw behind it a little bit being in the military and just watching the conflicts go on and then the political class just benefit from it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, but I don't think it's still fully lifted. I thought it was more of an issue of like foreign policy, thinking and stuff like that. But then this last year of just watching the media, big tech, and the corporations come up with this alliance to keep the lockdowns going, to really, really push mail-in voting.
Yeah.
And then to absolutely silence anyone who disagrees. Like we can't even have a discussion about like, hey, how'd that 2020 election happen? What happened in the lead up? Why did we switch to paper ballots? Or excuse me, mail-in voting ballots, throughout most of the country on a dime? And then why can't we switch it over so fast? Why can't we have like a full after action review and be like, so what happened here? We can't even discuss these things.
Like I saw a snippet of Rand Paul being interviewed by it was Chris Matthews or someone. I don't know. And it was like he started to talk about election fraud.
They just cut him off.
And he's like, hey, I just want just yes or no.
Right.
Are you saying that Joe Biden was not legitimately elected?
Right.
Yes or no? And it's like, and I mean, Rand Paul knows how to deal with those people.
Right.
He did. It was a great interview.
Yeah.
And he goes, listen, for you to just cut me off and just completely dismiss election fraud when we have a lot of incidents of election fraud, to just dismiss it and not be allowed to talk about it, you guys are being unreasonable.
Absolutely.
You know? Now, is he saying that it changed the course of the election? Well, who knows, right?
Like maybe we should investigate that.
But yeah, why can't we take a look at that?
Yeah, I mean, it's only the foundation of like the social contract that we have with our government is the fact that we get to elect these guys. So if we can't at some point go in and audit it, and ask fair questions, and if that's just going to automatically get people like deplatformed, that's insane. So
yeah.
I mean,
it's these corrupt politicians' way of perpetuating their power and their wealth.
Yeah.
And I think anybody with their eyes open sees it for what it is now.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's so stupid. In Washington State, I mean, did you watch the Culp-Inslee debate?
I did, yeah.
I mean, it was the most ridiculous thing that I've ever watched.
Yeah.
And somehow Inslee gets reelected.
Right.
So at some point you have to ask, there's more than meets the eye here.
And we do mail-in voting here
and
have been for a while. And so you see all these questions pop up and it's like, I don't understand why we can't ask them, why there can't be some sort of accountability. And especially the deplatforming that happened with like President Trump and then Parler right after January 6th. Just, I mean, seeing that veil get lifted for me was a huge, like, hey, I want to do something. I'm not in the military anymore, but I want to continue to serve and give back. What can I do? And so I was looking at, just being a local, community organizer, working at one of the precincts for election security type of stuff. And then I'm down in the 3rd district. My representative during the impeachment trial said, hey, I'm going to vote for the impeachment of Trump. She's a Republican, Jamie Herrera Butler. And she said that, she felt like she was in danger and that Trump had like fueled the events of the 6th and somehow directed the people to go into the building. So that got me pretty motivated. And I was like, I think I'm gonna start getting a campaign together, potentially just to see if nobody else steps up, I'll do it. I kind of wanted to see what the climate was. And then last weekend, she went like one step further when the Senate was still doing the trial, not this past weekend, 2 weekends ago. And she said that she was going to be the star witness for the Democrats' impeachment trial. She was going to give basically secondhand information. She claimed that the Speaker of the House, McCarthy, said to her that he had talked to Trump and Trump said something dismissive about the rioters. So she didn't even hear the phone conversation with the president. She heard it from a guy who heard it from a guy, basically.
Yeah. Hey, newsflash, hersay is not admissible in court.
Exactly. Just common sense. But she wanted to grab the media spotlight that. And so with that, offering up to be a witness. So I was like, hey, that doesn't sit right with me. She's just stabbed everybody in the back in our district because our district went overwhelmingly for Trump. And we're at the very southern part of Washington State. So we're right on the Oregon border. So we're basically sandwiched in between Olympia and Portland.
Yeah.
So we've got we're sandwiched between two failing Democrat run cities. So basically, if we show that we can be manipulated with our leadership, they're going to come right in and take over, our major urban bases with the garbage that they push out of, Portland and the garbage they push out of Olympia. So I was like, hey, I need to actually go ahead and announce as soon as possible, so I can let her know that, hey, she's on notice. We're going to come for her.
You're going to take her seat.
Yeah, we're going to take her seat. And so right now there's some other candidates have announced that are good people as well. So the Republican Party down there, we're gonna figure it out. We're gonna present a pretty good primary challenge to her, just to hold that district, to make sure that it doesn't, fall basically to the far left.
Wow. You're going to get it too.
I hope so, man.
I think you will.
We're gonna
and you're the right guy for it. With
man.
all your experience and everything you bring to the table, and you're still passionate about it, you know, and you're here, you're going to do it for the right reasons. I got to tell you though, like, because I've had a lot of people reach out to me over the last 6 months, like, get into politics. And it's like, sit down and buckle up.
Yeah.
Because they're going to come for you.
They are going to, exactly,
you know,
man.
and it's not that you're need to be intimidated by them or anything, but it will get exhausting.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
you know,
I think the big thing is just, we've already been through so much, you know, for this country. And we, you know, you enlist in the Army for the right reasons. You know, there's some adventure and stuff there, but you keep doing it. You keep going back overseas because you love the country and you care about the community, you know? And I feel the same way here, just watching, like we said, like we talked about, like all the dominoes that have fallen. I think more guys like us have to get off the bench. I mean, same thing for you. When you made that video, you know, you had no idea where it was going to take you. You know, for all you knew, you were just going to like get fired the next day and never be able to work again. But you were like, screw it, man. I'm going to say something. People needed to hear that.
People needed to hear it.
They needed to hear it from a police officer.
Yep.
They needed to see a guy with a badge.
That's exactly why I did it in my patrol car. Because my chain of command said that to me. Like, if you would have done it on the weekend in your backyard, we wouldn't be upset with you. And I said,
it wouldn't have mattered.
It didn't need to come from a guy with a hoodie on sitting in a lawn chair.
Yep.
That's not who the message needed to come from.
Yeah.
You know? And, I had to be willing to put it all on the line because I felt like that message needed to be heard. And the thing is, if that's where the profession's at, to where we raised our right hand and swore an oath to defend people's constitutional rights, and now we're trampling on them, maybe it's time for me to go anyways. Yeah. That, you know what I'm saying? And so it's funny because my wife is like, all right, here we go again. Like, life's always an adventure, you know? But, yeah, I mean, that ended up turning out to be a blessing in disguise. And the same thing like we talked about earlier, I think doing the right thing and doing what you feel you need to do will be rewarded in some capacity. And that's why I think you're going to have success with this. I just feel like the energy, I think you're the right guy for it. I
hope so, man. I think right now, and it's not about me or about my story, but I think there's a huge opportunity, and that was created initially by Trump. I think because he really plowed through a lot of the traditional ideology in the Republican Party that opened it up for more ideas. But then ever since the events of 2020, and we've seen the veil get lifted on how rigged the system is. Yeah, I think there's just a huge opportunity right now for guys like me and you, and we both have very similar backgrounds, so not just you and I, but like regular, hardworking people who want to do the right thing. I think there's going to be a huge call to service. You know. Yeah.
And I've been talking about it a lot lately, and it's not just because I'm a conservative, but even on the left, like Tulsi Gabbard. Yeah. And people get mad at me when I talk about what, you know, it's like, and because I tend to lean right on most things, but the reality of Tulsi Gabbard is the words that are coming out of her mouth are congruent with what she feels in her heart.
Yes. Yep.
Those are the type of people we need. I'm not saying we need a bunch of people that we agree with on everything. No. We just need people that when they're standing up and they're telling you what they're going to do and what they believe, that we can trust those things. Yeah. And then we can figure out all the nuances and have discussions and vote on issues and figure out where, like, where we want to take our country, what direction we want to take it. But in order for any of that stuff to work properly, the people that are steering that ship, they have to have integrity.
They have to have integrity, and they have to be willing to actually have the conversations too. Like, I think the thing about Tulsi, and again, I mean, she's a veteran, so we can relate to that, similar experiences, but she's willing to talk to people. She goes out and she talks to a wide variety of different people on the left and on the right, and she calls out kind of both sides on their BS. And so you know you're having a genuine conversation with her. But if right away you're going to start from, I can't talk to that person because of like the R or the D next to their name, or because like they voted for Trump or they're a Bernie guy, like then we got nothing. Then we're just going to be at each other's throats.
Then it's just gridlock, you know? Well, did you listen to her on Rogan about a month ago?
I did. Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, that was an eye-opening conversation because when she said that they passed like legislation to let people out of prison that were incarcerated for marijuana related charges. Yep. And she said, and she didn't say it by name, but she's like, she got called in by Democratic leadership. Yeah. and straight up told her, hey, we agree with this. We think it's a good move, but we're not going to implement it until after Trump's out of office.
Oh, yeah.
Because we can't allow him to look like he gets any credit for this.
Yeah.
Think about that. You got human beings that you have determined don't deserve to be sitting in a cage, but we're going to keep them in a cage like a fucking zoo animal.
Yeah.
Because what if it made Trump look good?
Yeah.
I mean, that's where we're at.
I mean, same thing with the stimulus checks. I mean, well, the lockdowns in general, but then going into the second round of stimulus where like there was a consensus that, hey, we need to get these checks out because we're holding people back, even though Trump was like, hey, it's up to the states. They can open up, and you get Florida, Texas, and all these other places that have just opened back up, and they're not holding their businesses hostage anymore. But you have a wide swath of the country that's waiting for this money they've been deprived of because we took away their ability to earn. And we can't do it right now because, Trump.
Think about that. I mean, that.
I don't know how
you want to talk about things that wars have been started for a lot less than that.
You're not kidding, man.
Yeah. Like, my children need to eat food. Like, it's just the most primal level of our existence.
Yeah.
And you want to deprive me of that? And I used to say this as a cop all the time, like, because I've had different parts of different supervisors or sergeants where I've had issues with before. And I don't think people understand that if you mess with my professional career, I interpret that as you trying to take my children's future away.
Yeah.
It's a very serious thing.
Yeah.
And I know in law enforcement, they'll file grievances and people get in pissing matches, and there's a lot of high school clique drama, and it was gross to a certain extent. I didn't see it as much in Seattle. I saw it a lot in Los Angeles when I was down there. Sure. But I used to tell people, I'm like, you file a grievance on that person because you're mad at them. You're putting a negative counseling statement in their packet and their file. Like, you're messing with their future.
Yeah.
Like, this is a very serious thing. It's not just something that it's arbitrarily like, you know what? He said this to me and now I'm going to go. No. You need to really think about when you do these things.
Yeah.
And I see the same thing in our government. It's like, you got to understand when you tell someone that they can't open up their restaurant.
Yeah.
Think about what you're doing. This isn't just, we're going to try and get Trump out of office. We can put all this on the back burner. It's like, no. You got have you ever been to the Maltby Cafe?
I don't think so.
So it's like a legendary breakfast place around here.
Yeah.
I've been going to since I was a little kid, and now they're going out of business.
God.
And that's just one of thousands of incidents where that's taken place. And it's like, that might just be one restaurant on its surface, but each restaurant has 15 employees. Yeah. Each employee has 2 children and a spouse and a mortgage. And it goes on and on and on and on and on. And our political leadership turned our back on all those people.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And then you can see the class difference and the class divide of people who they know that their paycheck's guaranteed, mostly people in the government.
Yep.
They know
that's right.
They know that no matter what, if there's COVID restrictions, I just get to stay and work from home. Or there's the technocrats and then the more white collar people they're just doing Zoom from their bedroom. Like, no big deal. You can log in remotely. Like that disconnect and that arrogance to play with an entire part of our society, probably about 60 to 70% of our society, can't work remotely.
That's right.
They actually have to go out and engage, and to have that disconnect and to say their lives don't matter as much. Their individual liberties don't matter as much. We'll just take those away for political reasons because I know I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm fine.
No, that's exactly right.
Can't you just not be so selfish and just do a virtual Thanksgiving?
Yep.
Well, it's not about Thanksgiving.
And then if you don't fall in line with everything they're saying, you hate people's grandmothers.
Exactly. You want people to die.
That's where we're at. And it's like, and I'm going to speak for you because it's probably very similarly to me, that anybody that knows me knows that I'm like a caring person. I'm easy to talk to. Yeah. Like, all of the things that these narratives are saying about people like us couldn't be farther from the truth.
Exactly.
But because it's being pushed out, like you said, on all big tech and the media and stuff,
like
guys like us now are like, people are looking at us like we're crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, like we're scary. We're something that needs to be. They need to do a study on like the military guys that are like they're closet white nationalists.
Oh yeah, that's
conservative. I mean, I'm glad I'm out of the military now because of the crap they're doing there with like looking for white nationalism or whatever. I'm like, man, there's.
So I don't know if this is true or not. Maybe you've heard more details about it. But when they had the National Guard go to DC for the whole inauguration thing,
they're still there. Yeah.
That they were looking on people's private social medias channels to see if they were Trump supporters.
Yeah.
Had you heard that?
So I heard that. I
don't know if that's true or not.
I didn't speak with anyone, but I mean,
because since when can a troop, a member of our military,
exactly
be a fan of your own president?
Right. Yeah. Or, I mean, even technically, like you can be a fan of the other guy, you know, you can be a Bernie Sanders supporter or, you know, who cares? It doesn't matter. Like we're all still Americans. Like, it's just crazy to have one group have control of the narrative and then be able to label the other part of the group as like racists or white nationalists or what, like you said, nothing could be further from the truth. You know, people that are the backbone of this country, like they may not be, glued to media every day or able to work all online, but they're very caring people. They really literally, they don't want a handout. They just want to be able to go make a living.
Yeah.
You know, so it's just completely insane to me that we have our political class is just able to look themselves in the mirror and tell those people that like, nah, maybe we'll send you $2,000. Maybe we won't. Maybe we'll get busy impeaching Trump and we'll get to you later. But until then, if you speak up, I'm going to call you a racist. I'm going to call you a super spreader. You know, it's crazy.
And what's even worse than the political elite and the media pushing that narrative is people buying it.
Yeah.
Like I got a lot of support when my whole thing went down.
Yeah.
But I got some hate too.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
And you'll focus, I found this out, is that you will focus on the 1% of hate more than the 99% of love, just because I think that's how we're wired, you know?
Yeah.
But I never responded to it or engaged those people. But I mean, we got people emailing us saying that like, you're going to get people fucking killed. So guess what? I'm going to come kill your kids. And it's like, what?
Lost
like,
their minds.
You're saying like, you're so appalled of my position because you think that it's dangerous and then it's going to hurt people, that your answer is that you want to hurt people? Like, well, what are you talking about here?
Yeah.
You know, that's where we're at on things. And it's also, everybody can say whatever they want through these. So they're comfortable telling me that they're going to kill my kids. I've yet to have the person come to my business and tell me that.
Exactly.
that would go down very differently, you know?
There's an interesting thing, I think, with our society, how peaceful and protected we've been, that there's probably about 2 or 3 generations now at this point that don't understand that like violence is actually a very real thing.
Yes.
Yeah, so they're willing to throw out terms like they want to kill you, or they're just as bad as the Nazis, you know? And we all know the Nazis are horrible. So like you do anything to get rid of Nazis. And then you're like, well, man, maybe I would punch a Nazi, or maybe I would like get on that guy's Facebook page and say like, I'll kill your kids.
Yeah.
You know, because there's just, I think there's so many people that don't understand the power of those words and the frenzy they whip people up into, you know? And the media has definitely been guilty of this, and social media has been very guilty of it too.
It's strange how disconnected we are from violence.
Yeah.
And on one hand, it's like, okay, it's cool that we live in a society that is generally safe, but we're nerfing the edges of everything to the point where the pendulum's going to start swinging back the other way, because like we're not that old, right? I turned 40 this year. Yeah. And fighting after school was not an uncommon thing.
It was totally normal.
You know what I mean?
Like the teachers would watch it.
Like, yeah, getting in fistfights growing up as a boy was just part of growing up as a boy.
Right.
Dude, if you do that stuff now, police are there, you're getting arrested, charged. Yeah. It's crazy. And it's like, it's all indicative of the whole shifting of this culture to where we're getting so far removed from violence that like at its core, it seems like a good idea. Like we don't want bullying.
It does.
We don't want people beating each other up. Like I get that.
Yeah.
But you kind of need some of that too.
You do.
That's part of living in this world, you know, and to completely detach from it and not acknowledge it and not be capable of defending yourself or imparting violence on other people. you're kind of doing yourself a disservice. And I think that's why we've arrived at this place where, like you said, people get on the phones and then they just talk all this crazy shit to each other because it's just a game.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah. And I think because we've made violence so forbidden that we've made the few people that actually get access to violence, we've given them an unbalanced amount of power. So if you're a bad person and you know that you can use violence and you know that all these other people don't know how to use violence, you're incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, where do you want to go do a mass shooting? Like at a gun-free zone, of course.
Yeah.
Because I'm the only guy with a gun. I mean, it's the same concept. And I think the riots in particular, born and raised in Portland. I have family down in Portland. And Portland's a very peaceful place, or it was anyways, until the riots started there. And people just did not understand the power of violence down there. And we can feel it because we've been around it before. And I was like, man, there's so much energy around this violence right now because there's people that they don't know what it is. They're a little bit intoxicated with it. Mm-hmm. But there's a couple bad actors in there that actually know how to use violence. Yeah. And they're able to give it some sort of focus and direction. And they're able to offensively use violence against people who have no idea how to like defensively use violence. We're just in a really weird place in our society.
Yeah. No, you bring up a good point, how you said people were intoxicated with it.
Yeah.
And I've talked about that before because this may not be a PC thing to say, but violence and chaos can be fun.
Oh, totally, man.
And when you're 20 years old and you're idealistic and you don't really know where you stand on things, but you know you feel something. Yeah. And you're feeling outraged, feels good.
Yeah.
And you know what? Yeah, fuck, let's go. Like,
common purpose.
Oh, you got bricks, like, and let's burn this down. Like, I can see.
Oh, totally.
How young men can arrive at that point, you know? Especially
a generation where, like, I mean, we volunteered for the military, but like we're at a tiny percentile. It used to be just our 2 generations ago, our grandparents, like everybody went and fought somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe they weren't storming machine gun nests on Normandy, but they went and they did some combat training. They had to go all unify for a common cause. So they were much more familiar with it, but that's been in 2 generations removed, but it's still hard. It's still hardwired into us, man. Like I think that when we, came up from the cavemen that couldn't like get fired up about violence and be violent, well, they got killed. And
they got eaten.
They didn't. Those genes didn't get passed on. So that little ape is still all inside all of us, but we've just like done everything we can to, like you said, nerf the edges and take it out of people. That now when you do that and you lock everybody down, like it all just bubbles to the surface so quickly. And it's so easy.
Reached a boiling point.
Yeah, and it's just so easy to intoxicate people with at this point.
Man, it's like I said, an episode of Black Mirror.
It is. It really is, man. Yeah.
No, I tell kids in here a lot, like being what you will find when you become capable of violence. Yep. And that's like whatever, as a special operations guy, as an MMA fighter, jiu-jitsu, when you become capable of violence, you are going to find that it enhances all other aspects of your life. Yeah. It commands respect from people. Yep. It is beneficial to your relationships. Yep. It changes how people treat you. Just because, just like you said, in the back of that monkey brain, they still know, okay, at the end of the day, it could go down to us beating the shit out of each other behind the gym.
Right.
And this guy would win every single time. Yeah. So I should probably treat him a little differently.
Yeah.
And I've even seen it like professional settings, like certain supervisors that would just talk to people in a manner that they shouldn't be talking to people. Yeah. Well, they didn't talk to me like that.
Yeah. I
wonder why, and I'm not going to beat them up in their office, but it's just a human dynamic.
Yeah, it is.
That I think is important to have. Yeah. And it also kind of establishes a pecking order, and a pecking order is actually healthy. It's like you look at a wolf pack, like there's an understanding of your position within the pack. Yeah. And it's like if Cain Velasquez comes up to me and talks shit to me, I understand that a fist fight is not going to work out well for me.
We need some standoff. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just good to understand who you are. And something I always like to say is, but it's also good to understand who you aren't.
Oh, exactly, man. Yeah. I think the people that have been exposed to the most violence, like, how dangerous it is, the power that it can give you, but you also know that like getting into a fight or saying like, something stupid on the internet, like I'm going to kill your kids.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you know that shit has consequences.
Yes.
Because we've seen stuff like that before. And when a guy like us reads it, we're like, well, actually, you know, that that's going to end up very badly for you.
Yeah.
For one, but then also, but there's so many people that just don't understand that. And so they're willing to take these huge leaps they shouldn't be taking with, you know, getting wrapped up into some sort of, you know, mob mentality or whatever. But I mean, I think like you said, that being capable of violence and being capable of standing up for yourself is very, very important. You know, that's another reason why I want to get involved in politics, man, because like, I feel like right now one side completely has the momentum.
Yeah.
You know, and if we don't stand up and fight back, and I don't mean fight back, like take to the
seizing buildings.
Yeah.
And
I don't mean that
stringing people up.
But
Yeah.
but I mean just pushing back and saying, hey, like, no, we're not good with what's going on right now. We need to end the lockdowns and, you know, a bunch of other issues. But hey, there's a whole, what I think is probably 60% of our society. Like,
Yeah.
Our voices are not being heard.
And the truth is, like, when you say fight back and fight back through voting and through legislation and the correct, reasonable manners, if this doesn't correct the problem, there will be real fighting at some point. And I'm not saying it's going to be tomorrow or next week or next year, but you can't victimize people for extended periods of time. Yeah. Because at some point, people are going to push back. And when people start to push back and you see people doing nefarious shit and blowing buildings up and stuff, like, it's going to be like, well, I mean, I'm not going to be happy about it and I'm not going to celebrate it, but you can't be surprised. Yeah. I mean, you can't be surprised.
I'm honestly surprised that something like the 6th didn't happen sooner. I mean, you can't 100%. You can't have one side of the political aisle completely sanction and enable violence and then not expect the other side to use some violence back too. I know. Yeah. I mean, the events of the 6th were stupid and tragic, like, and set us back. However, like, man, if they keep pushing, like like you said, it's going to go to a place that we don't want to go. Yeah. And guys like us have seen that place. Yep. And we don't want our country to go there.
Exactly. And I said that in my initial video, like, I've been to places. Yep. And the events that took place on the 6th, that wasn't violence. Right. That newsflash. Yeah. Like, we'll tell some stories about Ramadi. Like,
right. Exactly. Yeah. You want to see
bodies.
Yeah. You want to see
trucks, like deuce and a halfs full of bodies. Full of bodies. Like something out of the Holocaust, you know, like real violence still takes place on planet Earth. It's not in Hollywood. Yeah. Like, and people can get brought to that point when you start depriving them of their basic necessities. Yeah. And it's like, every man alive would kill another person if it meant the survival of his children. Yep. And so you start to put people in these scenarios sooner or later. Yeah. It's just how human beings are wired, you know? And I thought that the lockdowns would push people to that point sooner or later. Yeah. And I guess it's yet to be determined. It seems like they're starting to let us have our freedoms back.
Yeah, they're giving our freedoms back.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, it was so funny because our governor just follows Gavin Newsom's direction. Yes. Like a little lost puppy.
He does.
And so when Newsom opened up California, I was like, give it 48 hours and Washington will be open back up.
Copy paste.
Yep. And then, oh, shocking. Yeah. I'm not Nostradamus. Yeah. I just am seeing what's going on.
Just watch down south.
So with this new goal of going into Congress, what does that look like? Like, that's just this specific district and will you remain local?
So you actually go to DC for about half the year. Yeah. So you're basically, you're your district's guy in DC.
Got it.
So to do federal legislation. So as far as the local level goes, like lockdown policies and that type of stuff, like the governor and your city council and mayors still have way more power.
Got it.
Than like your congressman or your senator or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, and you lived in DC for a long time, so
I did.
It'd be kind of like going, bouncing back and forth.
Yeah. No desire to like I said, I didn't have a desire to like go back to DC until all this happened. Cause DC is it's a
cesspool.
It's a cesspool, man. I mean, like really it is like the currency there is power, you know, everybody wants some proximity to power. and that just creates a whole weird set of incentives, you know. And so if I'm elected, I'm going to go there with the intent of maybe doing a term or two. I mean, congressmen are getting reelected, you know, every 2 years, basically. They have to go raise money and make their case again.
Yeah.
Which, you know, I think that makes them a little bit more accountable, because every 2 years they kind of have to go explain themselves.
Yeah. Good. Right.
It's good, but it also does put them in this constant phase of having to raise funds, which I think is a bit weird.
So then it kind of takes away you can only
takes your eye off the ball a little bit.
I see.
But I do think congressmen and senators need term limits. Like,
of course.
I mean, if we make the president rotate out every 8 years, like, we need to make those guys rotate out every 8 years. I mean, living in DC, I'd see the $1 million home, you know, townhouses that like these longtime congressmen and senators have there. And it's disgusting. It's like, dude, you're supposed to be representing your district. Like, where did you get the money on the government salary, having to maintain 2 different houses in your state and here to live in freaking, you know, the most hipster part of DC, you know? Well, it's crazy to me.
It's the government is out of touch with reality.
Very.
On every single level.
Yeah.
And I've talked about it when I was with the Department of Justice doing security details for Supreme Court justices.
Yeah.
Dude, no expenses. Like they're willing to spend money on anything and everything to make sure they have the most lavish parties and the best cocktails. Like, we went out and it was, I used to work with a lot of the different justices coming into Los Angeles. I forget which one it was, but we went to this party in the Annenberg Estates, and they had like John Legend on the piano, and they had this choir of like 50 kids that they said was a high school choir, but they were all like beautiful people, like every single one of them. Right. And they had, when they got done drinking their coffee, they opened this box up and like 100 white doves flew off into the sky. Just a bunch of bizarre stuff. Right. And I'm thinking, this is all in taxpayer dollars. Yeah. What is going on here?
Yeah.
And so you may not think of it as a big deal because those white doves cost $300 or whatever it was, but times that going on in a million different times around the country.
Yep.
Money just gets pissed away.
It does.
All day, every day.
Yeah.
You know?
And again, because we just lead these same people over there. I mean, because it's such a high bar, you have to raise so much money to get elected. You know, those people build an infrastructure that gets them reelected, but then people are putting money into those coffers to get them reelected. They expect to get returned.
Yeah.
A favor to be returned.
That's where it starts to get dirty.
That's where it gets super dirty, man. So like if I'm elected, I don't want to hold that seat for an extended period of time. And I don't think we should. I think we should be constantly passing the baton to like the next capable, you know, hardworking person from your district that's still in touch with it. Because when you start hitting the woman that I want to primary, she's been there for 11 years. You know, I think somewhere we're in the 5 to 8 year range, you're probably losing touch of where you came from.
Yeah.
You know, you're probably becoming more of a DC person than you are a Washington State person or a Missouri, wherever you're from.
Yeah.
You know, because you just live in that Beltway bubble.
Well, wasn't it Washington that said something along the lines of like American politics? The whole idea behind it is like you go from the plow.
Exactly.
Back to DC to do your basic, like your duty.
Yeah.
And then back to the plow, like go back to doing your life.
Yeah. We're not supposed to have royalty here in America, but but we have it. But we have it. Yeah.
It's unmistakable.
Yeah.
So then, I mean, it sounds like you kind of have an idea of where you want to take this. It'll be a few terms, and then I guess kind of play it by ear, see where you go from there. But initially you're thinking probably just one stint and get back out of it.
Yeah. I mean, right now I'm just trying to make it to the primary and then the primary and the election. That's the goal. What's
the timeline on it?
So right now we're trying to figure out who the best candidate to primary Jamie Herrera Butler is. So there's a couple different conservatives that are coming out and throwing their name in the hat. And so we're going to figure it out internally. And then August of 2022 is the actual primary.
Okay, so you got a decent amount of time leading up to that.
Yeah, but Washington State has nonpartisan primaries. So basically everybody can throw their name in the hat, And then whoever the top 2 vote getters, they move on to the general and run against each other. So like the president, you know, like the national presidential ones, all the Republicans run against each other and just Republicans vote. And same with the Democrats. And they each send one guy to go against each other. Washington's not that, or Washington State's not that way. So we kind of have to do some internal sorting ahead of time. Otherwise, the Republicans, we could all have a circular firing squad on each other, and then we could just put a Democrat in if we screw it up.
I see.
We're definitely trying to deconflict that internally to make sure that doesn't happen.
What could I do or listeners do to kind of start to support your vision and follow you and what help out in any way that you need it?
Yeah, so I'm on all social media. So joekentforcongress.com is where people can go. They can email me to tell me about like the issues that matter to them, especially if they're in the 3rd district. Like I want to earn the vote. I want them to either get to know me with questions or them tell me the issues that affect them, and I'll do the best I can to tell them what my position is, and do my own research and try and figure out how I can best meet that mail. Of course, there's a donation link on there. I still feel weird asking people for money, but it's a big thing in politics. So if I want to,
you can't do it without it.
I can't do it without it.
There's no way around it. Yeah.
So if people like what I have to say and they want to help out with the grassroots effort that we're doing, they can on joekentforcongress.com. There's a link to donate, so they can donate some money if they feel so inspired.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And I'll put links in the show notes to all that stuff. So anyone awesome, listening can just go look and take you right to your different pages and whatnot.
Sweet.
So yeah, we're at 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Oh, damn.
We can go as long as you want, or if if you want to wrap this up, kind of give just final thoughts or.
Yeah, no, that's great, man. It's perfect. Some final thoughts really are, hey, this is kind of what I think we're coming up on our last chance to kind of push back against the establishment, our political class, mainstream media, and big tech. And we need good, hardworking Americans to like get off the bench and help push back. Down in the 3rd district, I want to go forward and do it. And like I said, I want to earn that chance. So I want people to engage with me and tell me what matters to them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the time is now. If we don't,
it's cool that you're doing this, man, because if people aren't willing to do exactly what you're doing right now, we're just going to have the political elite, like you said, royalty, that are going to control things indefinitely.
Yeah.
Yep. So, man, that's cool. I appreciate you coming on. I love that we connected the dots and we're actually in the same company together.
Small world
back in the day.
Yeah.
But
I can't believe it was 20 years ago.
I know. As this continues, as you gain momentum with this and start to get closer to the elections and whatnot, hit me up. Come on whenever you want.
Okay. Awesome.
And I don't have the Joe Rogan platform yet.
You're getting there, man.
But hey,
you're getting there.
No, like the more we can help you gain momentum and get your name out there and stuff, I'm stoked for it, man. I think it's cool. So, all right. Thanks for coming on, man.
Cool, man. Definitely. Thanks for having me.